Hey everybody, if you want to skip right to the interview, skip to 5 minutes. Hello everybody and welcome to episode number 46. Guest today's name's Sam Wright. Sam was another guest for the podcast that comes from Lister Hall, and I think over the last 45 podcasts, when everybody comes on that's from Lister, I ask a couple questions and it usually comes up, maybe a bit of dodgeball come up or a bit of the court case that they went through, and Sam was the president of the LHSA, which is the Lister Hall Students Association, which was kind of the student group that ran all the activities and kind of were the leadership on the floors and helped create the environment that made it so special. And if you've listened to any podcasts with anybody from Lister, but you've heard me talk about what a special place it was and what it allowed for myself, for my sister, for a lot of people I've talked to, and just kind of what the university did to stomp that out as best they could. And it actually ended up going to court cases, and Sam was the president of the LHSA, who is fighting for the students in these court battles and in these closed door meetings. And we get to go through all that today. And I think a lot of people would have heard some of the issues I have with the university after my time there, mainly how they treated my best bud Fraser, getting him kicked out of Lister, and then making special calls to get him kicked off the football team, one of his dreams, without any consultation, any reading of the rules with any sort of compassion. Just he really did nothing wrong, and it's just things like that over and over. And I had kind of forgotten a lot of what they put us through those years, and we talk about it a little bit, but we were young kids at that time. We were, just trying to figure out who we were, and we're in these very adult situations going up against these people with unlimited power. They had the opportunity to say whatever they wanted, to put anything in place that they wanted, and we couldn't do anything. And it was very eye-opening for how the real world works and how power dynamics work. It was very inspiring to see in the face of all that how we never gave up, and they just put these insurmountable things in front of us thinking they'll quit, they'll give up. It just, we do one more year, there'll be no one left to come and push back on some of these things, and we'll just get our way. And that never happened at any point. And it was very fun to get Sam's side of it, to hear, because I was involved a lot of the way, but there was a lot of behind closed doors meetings and actual in-court proceedings that I didn't get to see. And it was fun to, let Sam rant a bit and hear his side of the story, and kind of see what came of it and what he learned of all that process, because I learned a hell of a lot, and I wasn't even, directly involved per se, for the most part. So yeah, it was cool to see his side of it. Sam's a really cool guy. He just started again, getting an engineering job this week. He was doing lots of traveling and kind of working here and there, and then he's working as barista, and he's just he's an awesome dude. I think he's going to do some pretty cool things, and he's a pretty fun guy to listen to. He's got some good stories, so I'm sure he'll be on again in the future. And I think you guys are really going to like this one. I think it'll shine a lot of light onto what Lister was, and maybe will help people understand maybe some of those other episodes or parts of the episodes where Lister was a heavy topic. It'll give you a little bit more insight into what it was, and kind of just the little society that it was. It was a small society. It was like a little town that everybody lived in, and everyone knew each other and helped each other. And that's what unfortunately the university saw dollar signs and headlines as more important than that, and really change it from what it was. And there's still people fighting the good fight and trying to hold on and keep it special, but I think it's very sad to see what happened, and it's good to document what our side of the story was from that point. And I would love to have someone from the university or Res Services to come on and tell their side of it, and try and I don't know what they could say on a lot of this, but I'm sure they had reasons. Usually people don't act out of pure evil. They have some sort of game plan in their own head that makes it all okay. So I don't know, maybe that'll happen in the future at some point. I don't know, but it was interesting. It was a fun conversation. I think you guys are going to really like it. Like I say every week, if you guys can follow social medias, I might be changing some of the social media, start posting from my personal accounts. I had some really smart people kind of approach me and show me maybe the light on some of that. So if you do see some posts start coming through my own personal page, it's not because I've changed any of my stances on social media. They just made a few good points there. Telling a friend really helps. Always looking for help with the podcast. Like I always say, you don't need to have any sort of technical skills. Just reach out. It's more just about people that are willing to see the journey and see where I want to get to, and jump on board to do whatever is needed to help bring it to that spot. So yeah, other than that, I really hope you guys enjoy this episode, and see you in the outro. All right. Thanks for being here, Sam.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Well, hey, that's good for me. Makes me feel good when people are happy to come on. So, a couple things I wanted to talk to you about. Something that's come up on the podcast a couple times, and I've had Yelena on before, and she's supposed to be on again actually just last Saturday, and now we had to move it around. She's gonna be on this Saturday, but I was re-listening to her episode, and one of the things that came up was the big LHSA battles, and in re-listening to it, me and her didn't get too much into it, but it was such a big event to us at that time. And it's so funny with years in between it now to look back on it and have so many people just have no idea what even happened, for all the emotions and all the tears that were shed over that moment, for it to kind of slip into obscurity like this. It almost doesn't sit right with me. And I thought, who better to have on someone like yourself that was right in the thick of it and kind of just let people know what happened from kind of the inside perspective, and let them know kind of what, not just you, a multitude of people that wanted to stand up for something that they believed in, and just what they came up against in that. So I'm wondering if you're willing to talk about it. I was just wondering if we could maybe have a chat about it.
Oh yeah, I'm so far removed from it now. There's nothing that resident services can do to me anymore.
Exactly. That is one of the nicest things about coming on the podcast with some people back in the day, is just at that time there was so much they held over you. They held over your educational life, your place of residence, and it was like a family to you. So it was like holding your family over you too. They had so much power over you that now, you step outside of it and you look back and it's like, man, how did we let those people push us around like that? Like they just had so much power, right?
And they held like cancel power over us too, where they always held the ability to, if they wanted to, they could claim it was, a student safety thing, and that the student group had to go, and that was it. And so then you feared for, oh, well, future people who want to do this down the line, are they going to be able to do anything if I push too hard against them? So it was always a big pain in the ass with,
for sure,
with actually trying to deal with resident services there. But they were not a fun group to push against ultimately now, 10 years later, 6 years later,
got to be coming up on it. Yeah. Cause I would have been about, 20 when everything was happening. Yeah. So 7 or 8 years at least. It's crazy.
It seems that a lot of, what they wanted to push through has gone through, but I think a lot was lost, and it was a really, really big shame.
Yeah, it is. So
should we start at the lister that we all grew up into, and then
that's what I was wondering. I was thinking maybe to start of just before you, even if we rewind even before you went to Lister, what did you know before going to Lister? What did you know of it, and what was it to you before you got to go there and experience it for yourself? Because for me, that was something that was vastly different of what everyone told me what it was versus when I actually got there and got to see it for myself.
Oh yeah, my dad lived in Lister in the 60s.
Oh yeah. Nice.
No, sorry, not the 60s. In the late 70s, early 80s.
Okay, yeah. We'll cut that out. He'll never hear it.
Yeah, but I had an uncle and aunt that lived there, like when it was two towers.
Yeah.
And I don't think the carpet changed between my dad being there and me being there.
Nope.
The 50 odd years. But then my brother went there. He was 5 years ahead of me in school, and he lived in Henday and 6 Henday.
Oh, great place to be.
Chief for 2 years. So he had told me, as I knew I was going to UofA, he told me, you got to go to Lister, you got to stay in Lister. Dad did it, I did it. It is a hell of a time, and it is he still has great friends that he met there on his first day and first year. So
yeah,
I had a pretty good impression. I knew what to expect, at least from a resident standpoint. I'd of course heard most of the partying stories a lot more vividly than just day-to-day life, because that's the stuff that you tell stories about. That was it. I actually requested to be in Henday because my brother was in Henday, and he told me Henday's got this Lone Star attitude, and they think they're the only tower that matters. They got a great little culture. So I actually requested to be in Henday, and I was putting Mac, and I love Mac. It's my dad's old tower too. So
oh, nice.
Got to hop into this place that I kind of knew what to expect. And I wasn't disappointed, but then I got, you get everything in stories looms a lot different than in reality. So I thought the tower events would be almost scary, but they were just so fun.
Right.
And my brother got the pierce nips
Oh, nice.
in Skulk back in the day, but
so maybe we'll just take a pause there just to explain to people listening what the tower events were. So each tower, there was 4 towers. When me and you went to school, there was
5 now.
Yeah, 5 now. Yeah, it's crazy to even think about. There was Henday Tower and Kelsey Tower, the first 2. Those were, if you know somebody that was in Lister quite many years ago, that's most likely where they lived. Then they built Mac a little bit later, and then Schaefer was a new addition. I think it's only maybe like less than 15 years old even now. So there was those.
So yeah, it was 61 or 62 was Kelsey and Henday.
Yeah.
Before the end of that decade was Mackenzie. So it was pretty quick after. And Schaefer was 02.
Okay. Yeah. So actually, man, Schaefer is almost 20 years old. That is wild to even think about. But when you live in the residence, the quality of life upgrades from a Henday or Kelsey Tower, even Mac to Schaefer is so much of an upgrade. It feels like it was built like the year before you got there, just because of the juxtaposition of the two things. But each tower had a tower competition. So it was King Louis was the competition in Kelsey. Skulk was in Henday. My Mac friends are going to kill me. It was
he was a famous knight in a story.
I know all I can think of is swords when I think of Mackenzie Tower. I just think of swords for whatever reason, but it's Ivanhoe. God damn it. Anyway, Ivanhoe, and then and Schaefer's was Valhalla, right?
Yeah.
So, well, I only got to experience 2 years of the tower competition, so maybe I'll let you explain, and I can maybe try and hop in to add to it of what those were, because I think also from me talking to a lot of my friends, I kind of got the back end of those competitions of what almost like a shadow of what they used to be. So maybe you could speak to what you got to see in maybe your first year of what the tower competitions were.
I guess, yeah, you're 1 year behind me, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So our first year, I really didn't get a big impression of King Louis and Henday, or King Louis and Skulk, because I was so immersed in Ivanhoe at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But they all had a pretty similar vibes to them, where you, as a floor, there's 10 floors in Henday and Kelsey,
and about 40 and roughly 40 kids per floor.
Yeah, and then 11 floors in Mackenzie, and you as a floor are a team. And throughout this week, you have a bunch of ongoing events, be they like sporting events or normally a mockery of a sport, or like puzzle challenges and ongoing scavenger hunt items that you are trying to achieve throughout this week. And everything that you guys do as a floor gets you points. And then the team who has the most points at the end is deemed champion of their respective tower competition for that year, which it held no value as a prize, but
just bragging rights.
It, like, I mean, until dodgeball was a thing, it was the only thing floors aspired to win.
Right.
And then, I mean, dodgeball comes around, and then, you also want to win the cup. But, oh, geez, JP Cup. Jeez. Oh, sorry, tangent about Lister. I haven't thought about dodgeball.
I know, it's funny to dive back in there, all the things you forget. And each tower competition had certain competitions that were, so Kelsey in my first year, one of the big things that was Kelsey specific was grail guarding. So you'd have, each floor would have a taped off, maybe a 8 by 8 foot square, and each floor had a grail, just like a fancy goblet, right, or wine glass that you design up with all your insignia and floor themes and whatever it is. And each night you would have an hour where you do grail guarding, and you had to sit on one knee with just fingertips holding this cup, and it's filled right to the brim, and you can't spill it. And there's other people watching you all around to make sure that if they see a little drop or a movement, I don't think you can move either. And if you see a movement, and there's also people that help organize it, right? This would be the FCs, which is part of the LHSA, which we'll get to. They'd be there on each floor watching and kind of making sure that no funny business happened. But if you caught them moving, you'd say, your grail is mine. You'd bring that to your floor, and you get multiple people. So then at the end of the hour, you'd have points for having your own grail at the end of the hour if you still had yours. If you had any additional ones, you get points. So that was kind of Kelsey's little thing. And then each each tower had their own little competitions like that. But then there was kind of the scavenger hunts would be a through line of almost every competition. There'd be a scavenger hunt aspect. And the scavenger hunt for me was always one of the funnest times. It'd be things like get a picture at each LRT station, get a picture at the giant egg in Vegas. Actually, by the time I came in, they had restricted it so you couldn't leave Edmonton, I think. But in my sister's first year, I remember seeing her, they were doing road trips all over the place to go get extra points. And some of them are really funny, like reenacting music videos and just doing parody music videos and stuff. Like, it was the amount of creative genius it pulled out of all these people because of how much they cared about it was just some of the funnest times. Like, it was so much fun to do it, but then to see all the other floors and compare your, spoof music video to all the other floors, like, it was just so much fun. It wasn't just that week, it extended out after the fact, and you just had stories for a lifetime from it.
Oh, I've still got videos of we had to do a cheer in Mackenzie my first year, and I remember we just put a bunch of work into it, and we had this guy, we wrote a song. It was a big old thing, and we had this guy ripping out the saxophone in the middle of it. It was
nice,
a fantastic time. So Mackenzie's, you had to do a scavenger hunt every night because Kelsey Grail Guarding, we had the one where you were running after and you had to go through all the FCs and go through all the clues every night. Yeah,
we also had one where I think every night all the FCs would go hide on campus somewhere and you get some clues and you had to go find all the FCs for each floor, and that was one of the competitions too. I don't know if you guys did that.
Yeah, it was
maybe that could have been Skulk, because I did both kind of, but I had mono during Skulk, so I wasn't as into it as my first year.
Skulk had a similar one, but oh man. And I mean, I guess Skulk in your second year got a little cut short.
And I'm sure we'll get there. I just figured if we could get a overview and then we'd kind of build up to it.
Yeah, and that my brother. So some of the scavenger hunt items got a little bit crazier. I think in my first year is kind of the last year they did some of the bigger things, which was piercings, tattoos, and haircuts.
Yeah.
My brother has his nipples pierced from Skulk, still has them.
Nice
for him 10 or 11 years later now.
Yeah.
And they didn't do that in my first year. They still had tattoos. You get a tattoo of a certain symbol depending on the tower that you're in.
Yeah, I remember my sister's floor, a bunch of the guys from Kiefer and them, I think they all got tattoos for King Louis the years before.
I am shocked I do not have an Ivanhoe tattoo. But I mean my university girlfriend had a King Louis tattoo.
Yeah.
And it's so common amongst all the folks there. So it's really funny to even after the fact, people would still get them when they were no longer allowed. The haircuts.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So in my first year we had I've got dark hair, like almost black hair. I had to bleach it all blonde so I could dye it blue and then cut a Friar John haircut into it. So I just had a little halo going around my head. And then we also had to cut off, and I say have to, but I'll get into why this is an important distinction. It was an option and I chose to do this.
100%.
But one of the things to get points is you could then shave off half of your total eyebrow hair. And I ended up.
Could it be half of each one, or did it have to be one complete one?
No, just half of your total hair. So I had a buddy that got permanently angry eyebrows that were always just arched inwards. I got slitted eyebrows, so 50% of the total volume.
Oh my god!
And I've got a lot of eyebrow hair, so it was it was a lot to work with. But that was kind of that. Yeah, that was the vibe. And so some people had one off, some people had the top halves off, and everyone got to play around with it and do what they wanted.
And one thing that we also forgot too is one of the coolest things, at least to me coming in, was I'd heard about these competitions and stuff, but if you won, you would get, so each tower, all the classic towers at least, not really Schaefer, but would have this tunnel that you'd go underground. Were they even underground or were they just enclosed?
They were underground.
Yeah. So they're underground, and you'd go to your tower, and there'd be these murals, right? You get maybe a 6-foot chunk of wall would be your mural, and you would see these murals going back to, the 70s, the 60s. And they were, you could see the art styles, and then all the people from that floor that won that year would sign it. And it was just this cool, evergreen aspect of Lister that connected people that went there 30 years ago to people that went there 3 years ago. And it was this really cool thing. And that was something that, we'll get to it, but they eventually ended up painting over them. And that was something that was just so heartbreaking to everybody that went there. Just the small bit of culture that was there that they were trying to snuff out by that move, I can't even, I try to put my mind, now that I've had some years separated from it, I try and put my mind in their shoes and see where they're coming from. But, you know, it almost just, the only place you can come to is them just being vindictive. Like, it's just the real reasonable, you know, I just can't think of any reasonable reasons why they would want to do it.
So I went through I was in all the meetings when they were discussing stuff,
Right,
and it was
right.
just like, it was, they have a brand and they want to promote this brand because they have this picturesque view of, you know, they can baby this kid through residence, and every 18-year-old is going to then, you know, go to base camp and have the best old time there, and
Yeah.
be a cheerleader for the university, and, you know, their entire life will revolve around school, and it doesn't matter if they make friends, you know, they're going to be on the same floor with all the people in their faculty, like,
Yeah.
blah blah blah. The whole mindset of what people wanted out of, or should get out of, residence in the eyes of resident services was so far different from what the students who live there wanted it to be.
Right. Right.
That, you know, I mean, it kind of gets into the disconnect of the entire issue at hand with resident services and the LHSA. It was just they ran focus groups, and they didn't live there. So
yeah. And hearing you say that, it's just something that I've brought up multiple times when this topic has come up. I mean, I've had lots of Lister people on the podcast, so people have gotten a little bit of a inside look at what it was that was going on there. I never spoke to the specifics of the issue, but one thing I always brought it back to was just the infantilization of the kids there, right? Just so much of all the issues that stem from all seem to come from that core being of, they just treated these 18-year-olds that were trying to be taught how to be adults like they were 6, and they needed to have their hands held. They needed to have a safe space, like, which is all noble goals when you try and give them the benefit of the doubt. But when you could so clearly see how the effects of what they're having and how what they were trying to do was not being accomplished, and just how deaf they were to everybody screaming that to them of, hey, we see what you're trying to do, but in actuality, what you're accomplishing is actually ruining what makes this place special. But they were just deaf to that. Right. So
their greatest fear was that a YouTube video would come out of some kids having fun, and someone would be like, are those kids drinking alcohol? Like, aren't they supposed to be in school? And someone else would be like, that's Lister Center at University of Alberta.
Yeah.
And it would besmirch the name of UofA, that you know 18-year-olds can have a life and grow up and have an identity beyond,
which is so funny to me, because I think you're right on the money there, Sam. But what's funny to me is, I think outside of Lister, there's nothing that makes me proud about the U of A, unfortunately, right? Like, I think that going out, the one thing that when people ask me about, hey, how is the University of Alberta, I would say, you know what, it's, take it or leave it. I have my issues, whatever, but you need to go to Lister. Lister's where it's at. Like, that is what's so special about it. The community, the floors, like the floor events, the LHSA, dodgeball, that is what the university experience. That's where I learned every lesson more than any of the classrooms. That's where I learned it. And for them to not understand that the one thing that they have that people can actually, be proud of and bring people back, they were trying to ruin. And they thought it was, they were so 180 degrees off of what they thought was the worst thing was actually the best thing. And what they thought was the best thing is actually the worst things about the university, right? Like that infantilization, that holding the hands. And that's what's making people come out of there unprepared, right? Like, it's just so funny to me that they can be that far off base.
Well, but they didn't care about students developing into functional adults. They cared about their image.
Yeah.
It was plain as day. They would tell us in meetings, like, hey, like, this looks bad on the university.
Mm-hmm.
We want to have this. We're going to bring this in line with every other residence. How many people do you hear talk about their residence and have these lifelong memories that they've formed? Everyone makes friends in residence, no matter what university you're at. Of course, you're going to have a good time. But how often is it like a place that people fight to get back to live in a shitty 12 by 12 room,
jail cell, pretty
bed,
much. Yeah,
the worst bed you've ever seen, a carpet that hasn't been changed in 60 years.
And also defies science, like the amount of absorbability, and like you could just take like a block of cheese, rub your foot on it, and it would somehow magically disappear into the carpet. Like that carpet and Lister. I actually wrote down Lister carpet when you mentioned it earlier, just so that we could have a discussion, because I think that is something that is just still defies my understanding of the world.
I have seen on multiple occasions as a demonstration, people take out a piece of bread and start grinding into the carpet with their foot and then just have it disappear.
It's just gone. It's in the carpet. Yeah. You can't even tell.
It defies logic. It is.
Sorry to go down a tangent there, but I don't think we would be doing a service to the people that want to know what Lister's all about if we didn't accurately take them through the Lister carpets. So then your first year, you came in, you had fun. And what is noticeable for most first years as they come in and they enjoy this process, they say, okay, what made this fun, right? It's your FC. It's these people, it's the LHSA. It's the people putting on these events like King Louis, and it's the dodgeball. It's the people within that are running it, right? It's not resident services. So naturally, a lot of the people that really got the most out of it, that really enjoyed what was put on in their first year, they would return in second years as an FC, which is a floor coordinator, which is the base entry position for the LHSA, which is the Lister Hall Students Association. And then from there was also VPs for the tower. So there'd be an FC for every floor in Mackenzie. And then there'd be a VP Mackenzie, which would be the kind of head FC, I guess you could say it, but they also were in charge of, planning the tower events, planning a whole bunch of other things, making sure there was resources for kids. It was actually the fun things are the fun things to talk about for a reason, but there was also a lot of other programming that went on behind the scenes. There was weekly meetings. And then there was also, how many executive positions past the tower VPs?
There were,
I know this is brain busters. I know it's hard to think back that far.
I remember we changed them. It was either the year, I think it was the year I was president that we changed, or maybe even the year before, or the year after. Fuck.
Who knows?
So there was VP Kelsey, Henday, Mackenzie, and Schaefer, and then there was
Ops,
Academics and Awards,
Finance,
VP PR, and VP Internal.
Right.
There's nine VPs in total.
And then a president, right?
And then the president.
Which is the role that you eventually came into. But to go the year before that, you were an FC the year before that when Eric was president?
So when I got hired on as an FC, so you both get hired and elected.
Right.
To go through the interview process, and then there's an election on your floor. And if there's multiple people standing, to be the floor coordinator on that floor. Right. The year that I was running to BFC, it was still a position that was both part of the LHSA and resident services.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I had to go through an interview process with resident services, and they liked us. And if they liked us, we got to go through, and then we ran in an election. And I actually ran against Garrett Bowman.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. I remember that. You were one man. Oh, I remember that.
No, Formac at the time.
Formac.
And I think this worked out best for both of us. Garrett, I beat him by one vote.
Oh, nice.
and he ended up being dodgeball captain the next year, which I think was a perfect position for him.
Mm-hmm.
A little phenom.
I remember that team now. And now that you put things in dodgeball, and when you put things in dodgeball, I just remember Bowman with the C on it, and you had the FC on your jersey. Yeah, that was.
I'm with you. Shit brown jerseys.
Oh yeah, I remember the shit brown. I think I might have had those one of the other years too. And that was one of the other things that made Lister special was dodgeball. And I've talked about dodgeball a lot on the floor, but one of the biggest things was you come in, all the first years excited, and the second years on the floor that have been through the dodgeball rigmarole. They get them excited about it. They go to the first tournament to show them what it is, and then a couple weeks into the season, all the jerseys arrive and they get dropped off, and the colors are pretty much the same every year, but they shift around, right? Each floor gets a new color. And if you win JP Cup the year before, a representative of your team would come to the LDL office, come see us. We'd put all the colors for the jerseys in the JP Cup, and they'd pull one out.
What?
You didn't know this?
I did not know this.
Maybe I'm letting out some LDL secrets here, but who cares? I don't give a fuck. So we'd read them the color. And they all have, crazy names, right? Like I'm sure Ship Brown wasn't called Ship Brown. It probably had some,
I'm pretty sure it was Ship Brown. It was
well, it could have been. I'll have to look up the Gildan book and see what it was. But we wouldn't show them what the color was. We'd just tell them what the name of the color was, and they could either decide to stick with that or re-roll. Right. And then they would walk out the door. We'd pull the second one. They wouldn't know. And they'd have to go on in surprise. But if they pulled, like royal purple, or there was a couple, black was always sought after. There was a nice blue. There was a nice green. There was a nice purple. Maybe I said that already, but there was like maybe 10 nice colors. And then the rest were all medium to terrible, right? There was an athletic green or an athletic gray that just showed sweat stains like no other color. There was,
I always like that heather gray. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
I had 3 bad years, actually. I had desert sand.
Oh, that's what I had my first year, I think.
Yeah. And then Ship Brown, and then safety orange.
Oh yeah. When you were on One Mac, that was when you're president.
Yeah.
Oh, fun times.
And then all-star yellow. So it all
ties together. Hey. Oh man. Yeah. So you won your election, you became an FC. And at that point,
halfway through that summer, we got word from the university that they were making some serious changes. And it also helps to know that in my first year, drinking was allowed everywhere in Lister, pretty much on your floor in the public areas. You could drink alcohol, which has its benefits in that everyone could be in a common area and not drinking alone in the rooms, and some downsides to that it encourages parties all the time. And there's some reasonableness to be taken in their decision to take that away, but I kind of disagree with it as from the standpoint of this is their home, so they can drink in their fucking room.
As did a lot of people. And I think that was the first publicly facing kind of clashing, I think, between not the first, but the first of the ones we'll speak of today was that. So they made this change. So they said there's going to be no more drinking in Lister unless it's in rooms, which, like we said, we can see that from their angle, right? They don't want everyone out in their lounge partying, right? People going by. It shows one message, but what got to me at that point, I was coming into Lister, so it was me seeing my sister and all her friends, up in arms over this change, right? Like, hey, what is going on here? And I was just kind of coming in like, oh, that seems like bullshit, but whatever, we'll get by. But then once I got there and got to see what it was such they were so focused on the image and what that would say for them. They didn't realize, and they wouldn't listen. This is just, we're going to say this a million times, but at that time there was hundreds of kids saying like, hey, this isn't smart. This isn't safe. What makes Lister special is having everyone have a safe spot in the middle of the lounge so they can drink. It's not people locking themselves in that room, right? As soon as you make people only drink in their rooms, that's when they get locked in. They overindulge. They lock their room. You can't get in there. You can't look out for them. When everyone's out in a common space, you can look after them and you can create that safe environment. And when, they would also have fire codes, so you can only have a certain amount of people in a room. So you try and, be safe and pre-drink out somewhere else and, keep an eye on those people that maybe overindulge and they don't need to go to the bar. But now it's just everybody slam your liquor before we hop on the train to Knoxville's or go downtown, which is so unsafe. And you could just see like the disconnect between their brand image of what they were trying to do and the actual safety that change created. Right. And it was just so, to me, that was the first inkling of, man, they really don't listen, because if they would have, and even if they would have given the platform for the students to kind of say their piece of, hey, we see what you guys are trying to do. We think that this is actually going to make it more unsafe. Can we have a discussion? And that was where it was the first time I saw like, coming in, you're like, oh, there's got to be, fairness in the world. There's no way they can just make this unilateral change without consulting people. And very quickly I realized that they did not want to hear it. And, the LHSA was the Lister Hall Students Association. It's a students association. So they were the one that were supposed to be fighting for our rights. But I think that put them onto a bad foot right there with how much pushback they got.
Yeah. So it all kind of ties together. We did get a lot of pushback there when they were initially talking about breaking the alcohol rules. But that was at the end of, oh my God, I can't remember his name. Michael, the president, when my first year.
Oh, right. So that would have been the year before me.
I've read his like year-end report and stuff, but
fair enough.
It's passing through my head at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's gonna bug me. And there was a big pushback there. And so then halfway through our summer, we get an email from resident services we get an email from Eric Martin, the incoming president,
Right.
basically saying, hey, you're about to get some bad news from resident services. Hold up while I try and figure this out. We're in trouble, basically. Then we get an email from resident services saying, hey, do you guys want to be a floor coordinator, just representing your floor with the LHSA, not getting any pay, not working for the university, or do you want to be a new position on RA, where you will work for the university and not be this elected person? And so a vast majority of folks say, hey, no, I want to work for the LHSA, and turn down the university. So they have to go on this hiring spree immediately and hire a bunch of RAs. Most of them pretty vanilla in Lister. Not necessarily bad folks. In fact, my RA was a great friend of mine, and you know, to this day, I'd actually love to go catch up with her. But it was just a very sudden change, and then they base it all off of the idea that they believed that the events that the LHSA held, because they were popular, people felt coerced to go to them, and therefore coercing a person to go to something in residence counted as hazing. It's the most egregious abuse of the term hazing I've ever heard. But they then filed a complaint that the LHSA was hazing people, and that gave them
so that was already getting the ball rolling that summer before my first year even started.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they had that ball rolling early, and so they wanted to separate from the LHSA, and they had this grand plan to do so, to which the LHSA brought them to court around this idea that they were supposed to be consulted around things. They had these bylaws in the LHSA Constitution, and there was a there was a law that, as an extension of the Students' Union of the University of Alberta, the students in Lister had a right to representation and were not allowed to be, jerked around by the university vis-a-vis the Lister All Students Association. So it was this whole big mess, and I'm not entirely certain the order of things now that I think back at it.
Yeah.
But everyone was basically given this choice of, hey, do you want to be part of the student group, or do you want to join, the dark side of residency?
Yeah, pretty much.
Not that it was necessarily the dark side, but it was, given what people actually wanted to do,
they were
no one ran to be an FC because they wanted to force people to, they wanted to run sign-in hours or anything like that. They wanted to be an FC because they wanted to represent their floor and run events. And given the understanding that we were all sitting there with, it was pretty black and white of what the more appropriate option would be.
Right. So maybe just let me, I'll take my spin at filling you in on all that I saw it as a first year incoming, getting a lot of this through my sister, of her being more, up to date on what was actually happening, me just kind of hearing this through the grapevine and, getting upset about it without even really knowing the full story. But it was kind of the first thing that came out was that drinking rule change, and everyone got up in arms about it. But how they flipped that was just, all these whiny kids are mad that they can't drink their liquor, right? That's kind of how it got spun to everybody. And then, and then they made those changes to the RAs on top, right? And one thing that rubbed people wrong right off the start was that they targeted the FCs, who the positional differences between the FC was that it was an elected person from that floor. And it was an unpaid position at that time, I'm pretty sure. And it was just
no, it was paid when it was a dual position.
Right. So, but then when they changed it to RA being paid, they made the FC position an unpaid position.
The LHSA did pay me $150 a month.
Hey, there you go. Right. So that's what it got turned into. But the big difference was the people that ran for that FC position really cared about their floor. They cared about that family dynamic. They cared about making that year special for those incoming people in the same way that it was made special for them. Whereas the RA position was very heavily monetized, right? I think you got free, it's not, maybe not free, but you got very much reduced housing, which was a huge cost.
Your payment was more than enough to cover your housing.
Yeah. So you pretty much got to live in Lister for free, right? Which is a huge incentive, but
And you got a sink.
And you got a sink in your room, which might not sound like a lot of people, but when you're in this 12 by 12 room with, no running water, a sink is very important. Nobody ever peed in those sinks, I'm sure. And that,
you're in free zone.
That room with the sink used to be the FC room. And now that got taken away and it was now given to these RAs. And then now you have a position where before it was elected. Now it's just anybody that goes in and runs for it. So now you have the people that had to be elected by their floor before. Now you've added power to this position. So now they have a lot more ability to get you in trouble, to write you up, to do all these things. They made it a much more punitive position, made it unelected, and were rushed to hire people. So they couldn't do the due diligence to find the right people. They couldn't, do things to find people like they did for the FCs, where you'd find those people that have that spark, that understand what Lister is and want to bring that forward. It was just people like, oh, are you willing to, be that kind of fun police on the floor and get paid for it? Okay, you're going to do that. Right. And the way it was rolled out really rubbed some people the wrong way. But all those issues outward facing to anybody that wanted to, read it in the paper or what was going on, was all under the heading of young kids are mad about these liquor changes, right? That's all that got out. All of this, the undercurrent changes, nobody ever heard about that. It was just, we've made these changes to these liquors. These kids are whining about it. That's what this is. Don't look into it. It's all fine. So we kind of went into that year. This RA position was new. You couldn't drink out in the lounges. There was a new position to enforce that. So everybody's trying to jam into these rooms to drink. There was RAs going around to break those up in case they had too many people. It was in 1 year, a vastly different change to what Lister was. And we adapted and we had fun that year and we did the best with it. And that was my first year. I had so much fun, for all that was lost, for all that we still made it. It was very impressive. And it was, the best years of my life. Those 4 years I did in Lister, it got progressively, kind of downhill for these things we're talking about. But each year it was special because there were still the people there that remembered what it was. And they would, by sheer force and kicking and screaming, drag that specialness along with them, right? As much as people tried to drag it away. So that's kind of what you walked into that year as an FC, as your first year in Lister, as a more than just a regular resident. So then maybe you can take it from there of what you saw going into that.
Yeah. So it was pretty immediately contentious. Like,
yeah, it was contentious right off the hop. Yeah.
No one was really happy about where we were. And I remember we immediately got taken off of all of resident services training. So we had to go then set up our own training program, include like stuff that was so ridiculous that they took away from us, like suicide awareness prevention. Yeah. Like,
and nobody, and the fact, and not to cut you off, but that one just fucking gets me fired because they created this position of these RAs that, and again, they're put in this position, they got told like, hey, this is a paid position. They didn't really know what they're getting into. And then they were forced into this kind of Gestapo role on the floor. Everyone was kind of out to get them. They were put into a rough position too, but then nobody wants to go to them. Nobody on my floor in any year ever went, nah, I shouldn't say that. That's a bit aggressive, but very rarely was the RA that person on the floor that people would go to. So now that suicide awareness training, that all this training to deal with kids, because that's what that FC role was. It was this family figure on the floor that you could go to for anything, right? And they took away all the training from that and let them go in blind, which is so dangerous. And so, like, again, it's one of those things where you rack your brain to try and find a reasonable avenue to get there, and you just cannot. And I was, sorry, carry on. I just had to make my voice heard on that one.
So we brought that back. Well, not me at the time, but right. the exec team at the time brought that back and made sure that we got independent training on that front. Right. And thank God they did, because year after, when I was president, I know of at least one scenario where I had an FC talk a person down from jumping out their window. Yeah, like exactly. And like, in my first year, I think I know of 3 FC relations with a student on the topic of suicide, and that they helped them through it. Like it is not insignificant, and having that FC there, where it was a person that the students wanted to be there, was invaluable. Like it was imperative to it. I know it saved lives because I saw it save lives. Yeah. So we got that back. We made sure everyone had first aid and, the basics and that. But that was all scrambled because they couldn't give you guys enough heads up. You guys were just flying by the seat of your pants. So they had. I'm really impressed by the exec team. They had a lot of folks there in Edmonton that year. and like a great group of outgoing folks that all helped with it too, and they had to do like press conferences and shit that I never had to really deal with. I mean, I spent time in court, but I didn't have to deal with the fucking press, so that's nice. They got together this wonderful training program concurrent to all these RAs being trained. And so some floors had an FC and an RA on them, who did not know what their role was and what the differentiation really between them was, because at the same time that we were getting trained, we would then get updates from folks in RA training being like, oh, we're actually told that we're going to be doing programming too. And we're going to be like running these things. Like, we're told just to ignore everything about you guys. So there was like some obvious points of contention between resident services and us, but
and instead of stepping in and mediating those things themselves, they left it to 18, 19-year-old kids to settle those disputes themselves. Just throw in these rules and these distinctions and tell them, hey, just don't listen to these guys. And, you know, you can be the most, emotionally advanced person, but at that age, you just don't have it within you, right? Looking back at the age we are now, and that's one of the biggest things I look back on this, of just all the stuff that the exec team were doing, and, you know, the court cases and stuff. Fuck, we're teenagers. Like, what kind of
I do not know how Eric Martin did it. Eric Martin sure. is this ghost wizard of this mythical creature who I know it impacted him immensely.
Yeah. And I'd love to have. I didn't even think about it. I probably to do this right, I probably should have had you and Eric both on. I mean, and just to let people know, Eric Martin was the president of the LHSA in my first year, and was the outgoing president for Sam. So Sam came in my second year as his first year president, and had was working off of the base that Eric had built, and he had gone through a very different sort of. But while all this is going on, he's the one that's keeping the LHSA side.
He handled the transition from it being a joint position to an independent position. And I think it hit, and the beginning of all the lawsuits and everything.
Right.
I think he, he deserves the vast majority of the credit for getting a lot of leeway into the organization being entirely independent. But holy crap, I think it hit him real hard.
Yeah.
I haven't talked to him in a while, and I actually would love to catch up with the guy. So I'll have to do that later. But he organized, along with his exec team, a pretty solid basis for us to work from, and then we kind of went from there. Pretty blind, but through the year it was all right. People's RA-FC relationships were it really depended on
the people on that particular floor.
So I had, my RA was Brenda, and she was wonderful. But there's a lot of RAs I know that were just pieces of shit.
My first couple of years, it was not a good time to be that RA. I mean, I don't think any, and again, I have, they were put in a rough position, but the thing is, it was a lot of power to give to somebody. It was a lot of power to just assume that they're going to act appropriately with it. And they never did. You'd hear just horror story after horror story of, my second year, we'd get noise complaints all the time, and my RA was terrified. I mean, he would never come give me shit, but then he'd go play his guitar, he'd come tell me, hey, quiet down, man. Fuck you. Then go, in my, I shouldn't be defending myself, but I just had no respect for that position or for what they did with him until my third year, where, we had Anissa, and she was awesome, and she was respectful. If she had to give you shit, she'd be reasonable. Like, hey, I know this is kind of silly, and the dynamic was completely shifted. But now you take, 4 towers, 10 floors of tower. So I don't know, 40 odd RAs that, are put into this position where they can either be really respectful with that power and, use it wisely and, bring people in and be that person on that floor that people want to come to, or they could abuse it. And I probably would say it was probably 90-10 to the bad side of them just getting drunk on the power. And a lot of times it would be kind of at a point where they'd really abuse it. And then the whole floor would turn on them. They'd hate them. They would never have no contact. The RA would barely be in there. And either they would, double down on it, and, it would just be all year just bumping heads against each other, or they would kind of come together. That's what happened my second year. Was, I think he kind of realized, hey, I might have overstepped here. And he kind of, rejoined the family of the group and was a little more reasonable with it. But to expect 19, 20-year-old kids to handle that process, to be handed that much power and to be appropriate with it with no oversight is just so, you can't just wash your hands of that and say, well, we didn't know what happened. You need to know that if you're an adult, you know what happens when you give power to a kid, right? Like
and we
prison experiment will show you that.
I mean, I probably have files somewhere. I think most of them got lost in the shutdown or whatnot, but we had, we would compile complaints that people came to us about, just so that we had this proof of like, no, we've been talking to you about this already many times. About these are the dates that we talked to you about them. These are things we were talking to them about. Like, this is a guy that is listening in at people's doors without warning for no goddamn reason because he's power.
Yeah. Oh, I think I lost you for a sec here. We're frozen.
This is their home.
Sorry, I lost you for a sec. Yeah, no, the overstep that we were seeing, like, it was ridiculous. Sorry, I think I lost you. They were listening at the door.
Yeah, they're just listening at the door and trying to catch people, completely ignoring the fact that they're this is their home, and there's no reason to be listening at a person's door in their home.
Exactly.
I don't the whole I guess before you were there was a position of just the rule enforcers in Lister. They're called Lister Community Assistants, or LCAs.
Yeah,
and God, it was not a popular position. That their biggest advantage is they had special vests they could wear.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the RAs got those too.
Yeah. Oh, I remember the RA vests.
Yeah. And when they were wearing the vest, they were freaking
policeman, pretty much,
Gestapo.
Without a gun. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it really depended on the floor.
But just overall, it was contentious, right? Like,
it was contentious.
There was good examples, but overall it was, not trending in the right direction for what they wanted. And the way they saw it was just, again, these kids are complaining about that, finally somebody's giving a little bit of rules. And we're saying, no, we're fine with rules if they're reasonable, but this is just way too far. And there's nobody to talk to air our grievances.
Yeah. Yeah. So we had our, VPs that we could all talk to, and they had their tower, I forget what they're even called, residents RS, resident supervisors or something like that.
Right. Yeah. RC.
So there's RC, residence coordinators. Yeah. It was the RC. And so all the RAs would have their weekly meetings with their RC, and they'd get like their marching orders from the university, and all of us would get our stuff from the LHSA. And at the top there'd be then the RCs is supposed to be having weekly meetings with the VPs, and then the Chris the head of Lister would have then meetings with the president every week, and how conflicting those orders were coming down each, because I eventually was in those meetings, and I would get just this cheery, warm welcome from Chris, and I think we'd both be frustrated. Like, I'm trying to just, let people live their lives and be reasonable, and he's trying to enforce this university policy. And I don't think either of us were really happy with the way things were, but it still ended up being just two completely different messages that get sent down the line. And floor coordinators and residence assistants would be button heads all the time. I had a lovely RA. Me and Brenna, we had our floor meetings all together. Every issue that popped up, she would talk with me about, or every issue that was brought to me, I would talk with her about. We both were happy to do it as acrimoniously as possible. Which
could have been there could have been things that put in place to make that more common than not, right? Whereas they did nothing.
It could have been encouraged.
Yeah. So it was very rare that you'd have a good harmonious working relationship with them, but that could have been done on more floors than not, and it'd be the exception that they'd be, butting heads.
And the all the credit goes to Brenna, because their rules, or what they were all told, was, doesn't matter what the FC says, you're the one in charge. Ignore them. When it comes down to it. But Brenna ignored that, and was happy to bring everything to me, and even let me pee in her sink.
There you go.
It is the she was like, as far as I'm concerned, this is your sink. only did it once, but you gotta, if you're
You got to do it when you got to do it.
It's a rule.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we got through the year pretty good. That year was like not so bad. As you said, it was I had a great fun time that year, despite all the bull crap going on. And Champs was still open, and because of that, Duke's wasn't always so busy.
You could get in without waiting in a big line. I mean, I never waited in line, but
I didn't wait in line either.
Exactly. We had our ways, but other people weren't so lucky. But then for me, before we jump, because I'm curious to ask, about the decision to run for president after what you saw that year. But I had my own little run. I don't even know if you remember this because you were in Mac at this time. But so my first year, I got elected as the manager for Kelsey All-Stars. And as you know, every year for Kelsey All-Stars, lots of the guys would like to shave mohawks in their head and dye them red, or not dye them, but just mohawks were kind of the Kelsey All-Star thing. So if you made Kelsey All-Stars, it was kind of this cool thing you got to do, right?
I did forget about that, but I now remember.
Yeah. So then I've talked, and apologies if people have heard this on the podcast before, because I think I've told this story when I had Bill Pickering on, because he's the one that kind of helped me through this. But they had told us that going back to the hazing rule, they said that because there's a certain, aura around All-Stars, people would feel pressured, and therefore nobody is allowed to get their hair cut because it will be hazing. If we see one mohawk, you guys are all done. Your entire team's done, right? Doesn't matter if you sign, like I, Nick Von Walkerbarth, give my rights to cut my hair or whatever. They said none of this, right? And when I first heard that, I thought, there's no way that's real. I just got to go talk to someone, So I went and I talked to, maybe it was an RC at that point, right? And, they were completely unreasonable, wouldn't hear it. They said, no, it's hazing. It's hazing. I'm like, it's not. I said, can you at least admit it's not hazing? Like, I get you're just enforcing it. And they wouldn't even admit that. I was like, okay, well, this is crazy. So then I went to the next step. And I think it was maybe that guy that was the head of Lister at that point. And I tried to have the discussion with him. And yes, he wouldn't hear it either. I think he was even more unreasonable. So then I'm just, at a loss, because lots of the guys on the team, like they were looking forward to this all year. Some people, there was guys that didn't make it, like I think Scott Verinelli, no, I think he was an All-Star the year before, but there was guys on there that had tried to make that team for, 2 years, 3 years at that point, finally made it. They wanted that haircut that they saw everyone get, and they couldn't. And it was, it seems silly to be upset about, but it was very meaningful. So then, I was kind of at the end of my rope, and I went to the LDL and said, like, hey, do you guys know anybody? And that's when Bill, I had just met Bill. He was an exec that year. And he said, well, let me bring you to the dean of students. And I can't remember his name, but he was
Frank Robinson.
Frank Robinson. Yes. Mr. Frank. So we go over, and I'm at that point, I'd given up, I had, from what I had seen for everybody, it was like, there was no reasonableness. There was no talking this over. There was no, comparing points. It was just, this is what it is, and we don't want to hear it. And we got into Frank Robinson's office. We laid it all out in front of him. He said, well, that's not hazing. He said, like, people are willing to write that they're willing to cut their hair, and this is of their own volition. He said, yeah. He said, is there anyone on the team that's not going to do it? We say, yeah, there's people that are choosing not to. He said, 100%. And he gets on the phone, calls the head of Lister, says, hey, can you come to my office? Yeah, like, when do you want? No, right now. Made them walk from Lister over, got him in the office and said, this is ridiculous. They're doing their haircuts, and let us walk back. And it was like the coolest moment of like, holy shit, there is justice in the world. I went back, I pulled all the floor. I said, oh, we got to do a meeting. And I brought them all on to 3K. And I said, I fought. I was just over at the dean of students. I've talked to everybody, and they're just not letting us do this haircuts, and just got everyone down, and then fucking pulled the Citroen. No, he got him, boy. And just the eruption. Everyone was so happy. But that was kind of my little, I didn't know what was coming down the pipe at that point.
You should have had a toque on at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Take the toque off with your mohawk already shaved in.
I think there was people cracking beers right at that point and breaking the shavers out to get it rolling right there, right? And it was just my little piece of it, and that was kind of my, at that point, that was what made me decision. Because my decision, I was an FC at that time, because when our Tower VP had to step down just due to school. You had to hold a certain GPA, and there's other, commitments that you had to have. So he had to step down at that point. My FC stepped into the VP position. So we had a vacancy on our floor. So just for the remainder of the year, I was that FC at that point. And I was fully planning on being an FC the next year, right? Like I was.
Scott Wakem's a freaking doctor now.
I know, that's wild. Yeah. Hey, he's living life.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, no, a special guy. And I learned a lot from Scott on that floor and what he did and the positions he stepped into. It was cool to watch people that, were similar age to me, 18, 19, and be able to step into a role like that, like into a VP position with no prior knowledge, and just to knock it out of the park and just show, like, it doesn't matter what people think your your capabilities are. It's just whatever you set that as. And that was very important. But at that point, having that, that little entry with the LDL and Bill and eventually Brennan, they're the ones that sat me down at the end of the year and said, hey, you're not being an FC next year. You're running for LDL exec. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm going to be an FC. And then maybe I'll do LDL exec after that, because it did seem like a cool job and something that would be right up my alley. But they were very firm and just pretty much told me over a couple teamers at Dukes that that's not what I was doing. And I was going to be an LDL exec the next year. But it's just so funny that if that little, if the res services hadn't pushed so hard against those haircuts, I never would have had to go to meet Bill, to go to, Frank Robinson and do all that stuff. And then I never would have been an LDL exec. And I don't know, just all the dominoes that fall from there. It's just funny to see how that gets to that point. So I had a little bit of, indecision over what I was going to do at the end of that year, but you just were an FC all year. You got to see the role vastly changed, not just the role, but the rule book, the entire understanding of what Lister was and the parameters of what game we were playing were just thrown out the window. And it was, changing goalposts all the time. And then you decided to run for president.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about that. Maybe just take me through that process, because I'm a little surprised by that.
So was I. I was in a band with my old FC when I was the first year. And I'd kind of thought about running for VP and just doing that. But I didn't want to stay in Lister any longer. And I didn't want to live on a floor anymore. I wanted to, move on at least and have a life outside of Lister a little bit. Little as I know, that was not going to be in the cards. And my thought process was, okay, one of these VPs will run for president, as they almost always do. Right. And none of them were going to. And
how can you blame them after what they saw Eric go through all that year, the heartache and
it was shit. It was a shit time. And I don't blame any of them. I think
what kind of, because at the point that I became an FC, I started going to the LHSA meetings and starting to hear a little bit behind the scenes of all the, the battles that you guys were going through with Reserves. And I was blown away. I didn't know all that was happening, but you got to all year watch what Eric went through, because at that point, and then running for an LDL exec, that was an executive position. So I kind of got, and at that point, the LDL was an offshoot of the LHSA. We were under the LHSA's insurance. We were, completely part of them at that point in my first year. So as soon as I kind of got on that train, I was in those meetings with Eric and got to see a piece of that, and it scared me off it pretty thoroughly. So what all was going on at that point? What all did you know you were stepping into, and what maybe didn't you know you were stepping into?
I don't know. I kind of thought it would just be fun.
Oh boy, did you? Little did you know.
I don't know. I'm up for a challenge, and I really, really enjoyed my time in Lister. And especially with the LHSA, and I was really passionate about it, and I was kind of pissed.
Yeah,
I thought that as these are people's lives. Why does it have to be micromanaged so much? Why is this so Orwellian?
Yeah,
in this I thought it was ridiculous, and I thought that you know what, I could, as a reasonable person, sit down with these folks at Resident Services. And once a week, talk to them and man to man, be like, hey, what the hell? Can't we just live our lives?
Yeah.
Why is this so why do you need to, put these kids through a cookie cutter and try and make it for this brand? And that obviously was not the end. I didn't exactly win those arguments, but yeah, I thought that I could do good, and I thought that in hindsight, I think maybe it's not nearly as much of a mountain or end of the world scenario as I felt it was. But this is a place that my dad had gone to and my brother had gone to, and it was it was part of me, especially at the time, and I really wanted to preserve that, and I thought that I could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny to hear you say that, because that was my exact thoughts of just it must just not be. And you know what? I probably have to, fess up to it. I think probably in my head at that time, I thought, Eric, when Eric gets behind those doors, he must just not be doing a good enough job to make them see reason, right? There's reason is reason. If you can make a good enough argument, they have to see it. There's no way they can just little did I know that that's exactly what he was doing, and they were just not hearing any of it, and they were just throwing up that steel plate. But I was very much the same. Oh, if you get me in those doors, things would change, right? And I can't blame you for that, for thinking that way, because that's exactly where my head was at.
And like pretty soon after, or immediately after I was elected, but like a while beforehand, I was talking to Eric a lot about it and saying like, hey, should I run? And I mentioned my old FC. I asked him if I should run, and he was like, fuck no. What the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Like you're doing engineering. Do you want to like drop all your classes? I'm like, no. I'll just do it. And I talked to Eric, and he was like, well, like, you seem reasonable guy. I didn't know him super well at the time. And I was like, hey, like, yeah, like if you feel like it, definitely run. There's no VPs running. And I think he kind of thought it would all fall apart, maybe not in his hands, because admittedly, I got into those meetings with Eric, and Eric is the freaking smart guy.
Yeah, he is.
He's very well spoken. He can relate everything to a reasonable, like a reasonable metaphor or comparable situation. And say, well, if you think this is reasonable, why do you think this is reasonable?
Yeah.
And like was not bad at arguing. He was just tired because it didn't matter how good your arguments were.
Yeah, there was no place for reason within those walls of those discussions. There was no place for reason.
And like you mentioned, Frank Robinson. Frank Robinson had some reasonable moments.
Yeah.
But later on, I ran into trouble with Skulk with him, and it was like, nope.
Same shit. Hey,
he was just under pressure from Board of Governors, folks.
Yeah.
Which is absurd.
It was endemic of the whole university. It was that, like I said at the start, it all goes back to that infantilization of, you guys are kids. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, it doesn't matter how reasonable your argument sounds. It's still coming from the mouth of a child. So I'm going to discount it. And that was frustrating, because that's exactly the opposite of what a university should be. It's, you go your whole life feeling that feeling of nobody's listening to me, and you're supposed to go into university. And that's the point where they say, no, you do have something to say. What do you have to say? Here's where you learn how to use it, right? And how to have those arguments. And it was just so backwards from what a higher place of learning should be. It just blew me away.
You're parroting the arguments that I had when I was most exasperated at the end of things, being like, right. Frank, come on. Like, why are we here if not to grow up and become smarter and question like these things?
Yeah.
Or do you want to have this overgrown extension of preschool?
Yeah.
On the university grounds? And that was what they wanted. And it's what they got. Have you seen Lister recently? I went there for Dodge Fest last year or something like that. And it's
rainbows and cookies everywhere and unicorns, and that's what they turned it into. And that's the roughest thing, is that the people that are going to pay for that is those people that will, I did 2 years of living on my own, and then they go into the real world and they get out of the side of that, or 4 years, whatever it is, they get outside of that university bubble, they go into the work world and they go, man, people are mean. They yell at you, like there's no safe spaces. Like you're doing them a disservice. I know you're in your own head, you're moral, and you're trying to bring, equity into the world, but what you are doing is preparing people for an equitable world where none exists. And
it's not a representation of what people are, and it doesn't prepare them. It doesn't have to emulate the real world, but it should at least prepare them for it. And it does not.
Yeah, it should at least be somewhat on par. There should be at least facets of it that will give you pieces, controlled tastes of what that is, which I think it used to be what Lister was, right? It would let you push those limits to find where they are, right? And I think people still did that, but they ended up having to really...
And it's not like it wasn't an inclusive or safe space or anything like that. Like, I felt it was way more inclusive in Lister than it was in my high school.
Oh, for sure.
Like everyone was way nicer. There was way more opportunities for people with different interests to find each other.
Yeah.
There were there was nothing about Lister was a place that I felt excluded from,
right,
because of any of my beliefs, and I was able to grow and become a more understanding and better person by living there. Not because of any fucking resident services run programs.
Because what made it was this spontaneous inclusivity, right? It was what was built there. The family dynamic that was built there allowed for spontaneous inclusivity, because you're being opened up to all these new people, right? Like I come from a small town. I met a lot of people that I'd never, I got to know people that were from nationalities and heritages that I had no idea like anything before, right? And I had all these preconceived notions, and I got to learn so much about my own ignorance of what I did know, and I grew so much. Where I pushed back was the canned inclusivity, right? That's where it pushed back. This doesn't feel real. This doesn't, when you sit down with someone from a new culture and you learn about them, and you genuinely have your mind changed on something, and you grow as a person, that's genuine. Someone forces language rules on you and cuts out anything that could be triggering and all that stuff. That is not spontaneous. It doesn't count, right? There's a difference between reading a book and experientially understanding a topic, right? And that's the difference. They tried to do I'm going to read this book on inclusivity, whereas that does nothing. Whereas you create this space where inclusivity is spontaneously there, and that's going to actually impact people. It impacted me. It changed me very deeply as a person. And then I saw over the years where that thing that actually changed me was slowly taken away and replaced with this stuff that would never have changed. It wouldn't have had an impact. You could see through it from a mile away. You don't even, after the first 3 words, you can tell it's so disingenuous. You shut down, and it's not actually processing. You're just sitting there listening to, because you're forced to, in the 8 hours of inclusivity training at the start of the year for every person coming in there now, right? Like, you had it perfectly set up to do what your goals were, and you dismantled it to try and
it was an organic system that they tried to codify, and that's really messed it up.
Yeah, they sure did. They sure did.
Yeah. So ended up running for president against Megan Chambers, who would have also done a wonderful job.
And she's a wonderful person, and she's a lawyer now. It's so funny to look at people like Scott Wakeham and Megan Chambers that are all these people that shined in Lister, and then they're still shining on their way out, right? Like, you could see that.
Hey, you want to talk about people that shined? I guess you already had Yelena on. Holy crap, is that?
Yeah, I know, right? She'll be on. She'll probably be the next guest after you again.
If I ever want to feel really stupid, I call up Yelena.
Yeah, and
she's just brilliant.
Yeah, she is, and
Scott Wakeham's brilliant too.
Yeah, there's so many brilliant people, and that's what was beautiful about the LHSA. It was an elected position that found all these people. All these people that were go into that. You have no special anything. You're all coming on the same grounds, and that cream rises to the top, and then you can see what it was because it was a good system, right? How many? I don't want to say this because it's going to be quite rude, but I think if you took that logical framework that we just applied to the FCs and what they're doing now, and you applied it to the RAs, it's not the same thing, right? And it's a very different system. But it's funny to see that they dismantled the system of finding the best people that are just the most capable and putting them into those roles, and then having you learn from really. I had Scott as my FC. I learned so much from him because he is that capable person that didn't let things hold him back, and really stuck by his values and was and had so much to offer. Whereas you take that system out that puts people like him in that position, and now what are you left with, right? It's very unfortunate. But yeah, no, Yelena was. I didn't get to know Yelena good enough in my first couple of years, but then later on, when I think it was the last year that we're both still in Lister, every time I wanted, I was getting too high on myself, Yelena would come down to the LDL office, and I'd be working in there, and she'd just burn everything I had to say and just make me stay on top of my, I feel like for me, it was hard for me to find people that could really push back and really question my ideas and really get me on my toes to where I really have to defend my ideas. And she was one of those people that always was there, and I loved it. It was so much fun, and it was never mean. It was never we always laughed about it afterwards. But you need those people, and I feel like that's one of the big things that they tried to take out of Lister was that they wanted everyone just to cooperate and get along, don't argue, don't discuss, just have that. And you need that little bit of friction to grow from. And I found that, once I found someone like Yelena, I would seek that out and we would talk more. Right. And then that's why it was so much fun to hop on this podcast and get to catch up with someone like that. And it's like, oh man, I could podcast with you every week. Right. And I'm trying to convince her, but I think Yelena needs her own podcast so that everyone can,
talk about the European chemical trade.
Exactly. I think she'd do an awesome job. But so was Yelena one of your VPs, or was she
Yelena was one of my FCs when I was president.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then when I was speaker, she was a VP.
Right.
And so I would see her both at every JC meeting, but also the speaker was at exec meetings.
Right.
And because I was
and I was at exec meetings too.
Yeah. And you were an FC with me, and then at
I was,
LDL rep.
LDL exec. So then I would be in the exec meetings too, because just for that year though, because the second year is also an exec, but because of what we'll get to and all the lawsuits and all the court cases and stuff, it was, implied to us
decision to leave. Yeah.
A good decision. Right. And that was not, that was done with the LHSA. That was a joint decision with the LDL and the LHSA that, hey, there's a fight coming, and it's, it's not, we're unsure of how it's going to turn out. It would probably be best for the LDL to go solo. And that's what we did. And that was probably one of the biggest changes that we went through that year. Right. But it was always one of the three of us, LDL execs, would go on to the exec meetings with the LHSA. But because both Josh and Justin lived outside of Lister, I was the only one in Lister. So it became, I probably went to 90% of those meetings with you guys. And I got to be a part of these court cases and where you guys were, everything you guys went through that year. I would get, little snapshots, and I don't know how much you want to talk about. I mean, like, I shed a lot of tears in those meetings.
I'm happy to talk about it. I'm so far removed.
Like, I know, but it was just like to see everyone go into that room, and you'd have a meeting one week, and we'd have you would have, I shouldn't say you would have a big meeting with Res Services, and we'd game plan all these logical arguments. We'd be just trying to arm you with all the ammunition up here to be able to go in there and make them see sense. And we'd come out of those meetings thinking, okay, we got this down. Sam's all locked and loaded with all these smart people, all our arguments, and he's going to go in there. There's no way they can. And you'd come back the next week and have to break it to us that, they wouldn't hear it. This is what they said to that. And we'd all, what? And all this stuff. And then we'd lose something. And just like, it was so mentally taxing for me, just as a small part, just to watch. I can't imagine what you guys went through emotionally, especially you, but then your exec team too. And what I'm curious about is how much through all this, and I'm sure we can get into the specifics of what all this that we're referring to is, but at any point, did the university recognize what they were doing to you and your exec team as young adults, emotionally fragile, coming into the world, trying to find out who they are with a full course load, a full responsibility on top of that with their LHSA, and then all this stuff that they're having on top of it with the disruption they caused? Did they ever seem to understand the emotional toll that they were putting on you guys and Eric Martin before that, and all the people they were doing before that and after?
Yeah, I had many conversations with resident services about that. It was I think it was a travesty, because I saw how affected Eric was by the end of his time as president, and I know a bunch of my FCs were having it, and I got just like condescending answers. Basically ranging from, well, just quit, to like, you guys are the bad guys, to talk to your RA.
Wow. Hey,
like just shit answers.
That's what I expected.
They didn't give a shit.
No,
it wasn't. It was never about like how well the students were doing. They were causing way more harm than they were good.
Yeah.
They cared about image.
Yeah, image is the bottom line. That's the two things they cared about through and through, and they weren't scared to admit it. That's unfortunate.
They were like, Lister's in the news less. Okay.
Yeah, that's what makes it special, is that how many times is in the news. Yeah.
Generic suicides in residence at the UofA are up.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was a weird.
Yeah,
they didn't care about.
They didn't care. So
our well-being, honestly.
So then, when you came in so obviously, I mean, we've mentioned it a couple of times that there was a court battle between the LHSA and Res Services, but I think that might even be putting it to a different point, because it wasn't real court, it was university court, correct? And we were trying to get it to real court, and they were refusing.
We were in real court as well.
Okay, right. Well, maybe take me through what was the court battle about? How did it start? Where did it end? Just maybe take me through that part, because that all started to unfold. There was no court before in Eric's time. He was kind of handling all the other stuff, and then as you transitioned to you,
there was court in Eric's time too.
Oh, really?
So it kept expanding.
Right.
I don't know if he had actual court. He definitely had university court.
Right.
But their whole basis on splitting the LHSA from resident services in the first place was that we were hazing people, which is the most fucked up, ludicrous, and insulting definition of hazing. I hope I can say fuck a lot, because I've only said it like 30 times.
This is a fucking swearing podcast. I I don't even look if there's a swear in the podcast. I just hit, does this episode have explicit content? I just click it without even thinking about it. That's
good call.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they said that we were hazing folks. And the basic definition of the interpretation. Oh, you know what? I should find the actual
their definition
university, because I've got a LHSA folder somewhere on my computer here.
And maybe while you search for it, it was another, it's not funny, but I mean, in the sense of the word that I'm sure you'll understand once I say it, but the definition of what hazing was to them, and it all kind of stemmed what they were saying, certain power that they had, and the power of how much people enjoyed it was what was, making it in their eyes non-optional. But just to see something, when you want to talk like abuse of power in that sense, and just what happened with the RAs and just the stories I know of, you want to talk abuse of power, I could name a couple RAs right now that were completely inappropriate, right? Like I had to step in with RAs and girls abusing their power, and I was, that is just something with me that growing up, that was never okay. And that, when I saw, I didn't care what they were an RA, like they're going to get an ear beating and reported to whoever it could be. But it was just so funny for them to be all high and mighty, just making these crazy logical jumps to, invent these things when their own people were, doing so much worse, like right in front of their nose. And they just didn't seem to care. Didn't fire anybody, didn't move them around, or maybe I think they fired the one guy that I was speaking about, but
yeah, they had year-end report, Samuel Wright. That's what I'm looking for.
Oh, the year-end report. I'm sure there's some juice in there.
A lot of this was just conduct probation. That was us. Okay, yeah. So getting into the hazing definition, which is absurd. Mm-hmm. It
I'm just trying with all my might not to sing, because when I get songs stuck in my head, I don't even realize I'm doing it, and I feel like I just got one right up in there right now, and it's just itching to come out, and I'm just finding myself like lip syncing, and I gotta just make sure it doesn't actually come out.
Oh God. Okay. Yeah. So their definition of hazing was it basically came down to they could say anything that a person felt pressured to do would be considered hazing.
Right. And what pressure was constituted was up to them to say what that pressure could be.
Yeah. As well as like what, it doesn't matter the intent or anything like that, or your actions whatsoever. If the person feels pressured to do it, then you were hazing them.
Right.
So there's some iffy parts where you can kind of see where they fall in. Like, so as a floor coordinator, I couldn't buy anyone on my floor a drink.
Right. Oh yeah, I remember that.
Because I would be encouraging them to drink, which is fucked up and stupid.
And you couldn't play any drinking games with anybody from Lister 2, right? I mean, drinking games were very frowned upon from them just from the start, but also, especially, I remember that year, that was the first year, everyone had to be super careful, even when because they extended this even to not even be within Lister. If you're out at a bar and they have, beer pong at a bar and you get caught playing with your, that's hazing, because you could have been, they could have felt pressured because you're a position of power or whatever, that they had to play with you. And now it's encouraging drinking. Like, it was ridiculous the extent that they brought it to.
Yeah. And there are some things that they straight up did not believe us when we were like, no, like I wanted to do it. The big one was baby birding.
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah.
That people were like, there was multiple FCs who were all by definition an outgoing, like personable person.
Yeah.
That, they'd also be 19 years old and getting drunk, and they want to baby bird one another, which is, as the mother bird does to the baby bird, but with alcohol. If they want to do that, they can do it. I don't care.
Right.
But because often what would happen is it would be an FC doing it to their incoming FC or something along the lines. So that became a contentious issue, so we stopped doing that. But then, as an FC, I couldn't buy a person a drink at a bar, especially one of the people that were on my floor. I was a single guy at the beginning of my time as an FC. I was buying girls drinks at bars. It just happens. If if I got sanctioned by the university for buying Leela a drink before we started dating, I would have been pretty dang pissed about that.
Yeah.
But that, under their interpretation of it, that was hazing. But then the worst bit of it was if a person felt pressured to participate in an event.
Right. Which is...
So that was our entire everything.
Yeah.
Every event that a person does, it punishes you for having a fun event that people
exactly
are encouraged to go to.
Because fun can be pressure to them, right? Like that's... it's so ridiculous.
So, and we didn't have to do the pressuring. It was if other people on the floor encouraged.
If you create an environment where pressure could be felt, right? Like it was just
like fuck you for like making this fun thing that people want to be a part of.
Right. So then you guys all year you're under those parameters, right? When you're out drinking, when you're on your floors, when you're thinking of programming, and then you have the momentous task of trying to plan those tower events that we kind of gave you guys an idea of, King Louis, Ivanhoe, Skulk, and Valhalla. Look, nailed it, all four.
Yeah.
And
in my president year?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is a fun one.
So you guys had to try and run these extremely fun events without, under that definition of anything that they could construe as being forced is going to be hazing, right? Any of these events, right? Like Grail guarding, that thing with the cups that I did, right? If that looks like a fun event and people are pressured into it, you now haze them into it, right? Like every aspect of it, almost everything, every aspect that the LHSA did that year, they could have come down on you guys for hazing, which was the mental aspect of knowing that and speaking with FCs that year, because I was supposed to be an FC. All of my best friends, all those real outgoing first years from my year, all became FCs the next year. So those are all those people that were under these restrictions, right? Like, and I'm seeing them struggle to, navigate this world, right? Like, same things you're talking about of, what you're going to do. And then to be on top of that, have this huge event that any singular thing could be on there, they could go after you guys about it. Pretty much how it felt all year was that there was a giant sword hanging above everybody's heads that they could just drop whenever they wanted for whatever reason they wanted. And we're tap dancing, just doing all these things, trying to play by the rules while also keeping a stiff enough back to not just roll over the stuff and push back where we can push back, but also trying to follow the rules. It was just, a tough spot to be in. And I don't envy it. But then, but everything was going good up until the tower events, right? I'm just trying to get my own memory to go back there.
Everything was going pretty well. So we were still old alcoholic events. We'd been limited to like 4 or 5.
Right. Yeah, you guys could only do 4 or 5 alcoholic events that year, right?
So we'd pushed some of them back. Like we were going to do a second Res Fest,
and the LDL.
I don't think we ever told anyone we were going to do a second Res Fest. We'd booked the dudes to do it. That would have been
pretty cool.
Sweet. Yeah. Which is why at the end of the year, the Students' Union took that bill, honestly. And it's why at the end of the year, prior to exams, the dudes played a concert at Dinwiddie.
Oh, I gotcha.
And there was like 15 people there. But they were originally going to be booked for the second LHSA or second Res Fest that we had planned.
Right.
We had grand plans. Wanted to, turn things around. But obviously things went the other way. And
of those 5 drinking events that you have, didn't they count the LDL's events as that too? So like the LDL night we held at the start of that year, my first year exec, and then I think we had a second one, it would have been an LDL pub crawl, or an all-star pub crawl, but I don't think we had a second event. Maybe it was supposed to be after, and there was already too much tumultuous stuff, and they just shut down all drinking events at that point too. Yeah, and then it was just unofficial. Come to Duke's. Yeah, pretty much. Here, son, take my jersey. I'll be late to my all-star game because you have it. It was all of this got combined. It was a stressful thing and God bless Tala for trying to organize those events, but we got through most of them, and over Christmas I'd had this big long talk with all my VPs, especially the tower VPs, being like, hey, everything has to be run with a fine tooth comb through your RC. They have to know every possible event you're going to do, the time it's going to start, the time it's going to end. They have to approve all of it before it goes. If you have a question in a trivia thing, they have to be able to see it. Right.
And this is
and
where
just
things
to,
got
yeah.
shit.
And just to remind people, so the tower VPs, those are the ones that are, so like a VP Kelsey, they'd be, in charge of those FCs. They were planning these tower events. They were the ones. And then the RC is kind of like that tower's head, they run all the RAs for that tower. So it's kind of the equivalent from the LHSA side and the res services side. And they didn't want us to have tower events at all, but that was our compromise. Okay. Every inch of this thing, we're going to run by your guys' sanctioned person, the RC, and we're going to get the okay from it, which took out a lot of the fun of it. It, kiboshed a lot of really good ideas, but at least it was going to still go on. And we were still happy with that. And what they came up with was it's just the human ingenuity of what they came up with within that rule set to make still a really fun event for each tower. Right. And then take it away. That's kind of where things went.
Yeah. So then, and it all started off pretty well. And then the VP Hen Day at the time,
which is the tower I was in.
Yeah, instead of printing off the spreadsheet and sending it to her RC, shared the Google Sheets with him, which allowed him to go
into
back
the edit history
and go through the edit history.
Poitras. Oh no!
Yeah.
Coming back to me, I forgot about so much of this.
Yeah,
right. So Google Docs was kind of new at that point, right? Like edit history wasn't really things people were familiar with, right? To not put all the blame on her for not thinking that through, because I probably would have done the same thing. But it
led to a shitty run of events. Led to the immediate resignation / firing of like 3 FCs, I think 2.
At least
Arth
2.
and Trevor.
Arth and Trevor both got and it was. And that
Arth, by the way, the doctor, the brilliant man.
Yeah, exactly. And Trevor's in med school too. Like,
yeah. There you go. Let it not be said that any of us dumb folks who were, just like fucking around as FCs are not smart. It's just, yeah.
And that one was personally egregious to me on multiple reasons, because that was my tower. Those were 2 of my friends. Those were, and what they were caught for was something that it was words that they had said that they thought would never be seen. Right. And it was, they went back in to dig to see what they said. It was taken out and it wasn't sent forward. And it was, the things that were said weren't very nice, and they weren't very nice about some people at res services. Right. But if you're going to go after them for that, like, fuck you. If you can't take it on and have the thick skin to handle something like that you have to ruin a young kid's, educational experience like that, like, that just fires me up.
The RC, just giving his first name, Trent. I hope he hears this.
Me too.
You are a square and you grew up to be a cube. You are so square.
Mm-hmm.
It is unreal how much you reveled and enjoyed making people miserable. Like you were a bad person.
It was disgusting. It was disgusting to watch when he did that.
Like he loved just like being bad.
And then he would smile when he would do it, and he would just sit in and it was, and you could tell he was getting so much vindictive enjoyment out of it. Like
he was such a piece of shit to one of my co-FCs, Danielle Hofele, when her floor got bed bugs. He treated her like such a piece of crap. I'm still seethed about it today.
Yeah. And also open invitation to Trent if he ever wants to come on the podcast and say his side, because I would love to talk to him about it.
Have us both on. I would love a panel.
There we go. Have me both on. That'd be great. Yeah, no. And
ask him why he's such a cock.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just some of the things he did to some of my friends' I just would love to. I mean, I've told that story. I mean, Fraser Oliver, one of my best friends in the world, one of the nicest people in the world, his story of what Trent did to him to get him kicked out and kicked off the football team and stuff and ruin his dream. Like, fuck that guy. He could eat a dick.
Yeah.
10 days right Trent, now at once. Fuck that guy.
You suck. We're all so disappointed in you.
Yeah. Be better.
Yeah.
Hopefully he's grown. And I mean, I don't know how old he was at that time, because when you're a kid, everyone looks old to you, and maybe he was, I hope he was also maybe 23 years old and learning himself, but I don't think that was the case.
Yeah, he's about our age. No.
Yeah. Like, fuck. I just hope that he's grown and realized that, like, cause that's actually one of the questions I want to get to, and it's probably the wrong time of it, but I'm curious to ask you, with some years separated, how do you think you handled the power of when you were the president? Because I think, just speaking personally for me, the power of being an LDL exec, I am not very proud of some of the things I did and who I was as a person. I can look back on it with compassion that I was, 20 years old and didn't really know what way was up and didn't really know. And to have that kind of power thrust onto you, I'm very happy about 90% of how I handled it, but there's definitely a 10% that I look back on and I just kind of cringe, and I've forgiven myself for that since then. But your position was so different. I wonder, and you had so much different kind of responsibilities. Like responsibilities for me as an LDL exec were a lot more fun responsibilities and had a lot more social cachet that didn't come tied to this bill of all the headache of these meetings and these court cases and all that. So maybe it's a different scenario for you, but how did you feel with kind of that dynamic?
I mean, I was I drank too much probably.
Fair enough.
I didn't have the best coping mechanisms amongst my fellow exec.
Mm-hmm.
I was a bad boyfriend, and you know, I was not as present or you know, open with friends about how I was feeling.
Right.
Because I thought that, oh, hey, I can't
show weakness.
I can't, you know, buckle.
Yeah. Everything was depending on you. And I think that was the position. That's kind of what I figured, because everything kind of, as much as we all wanted to support you, at the end of the day, you were the one going into those court cases. You were the one that was going into these meetings, and you were kind of the backbone of everyone else. Right. So you couldn't really show weakness, which is something that I was feeling. I was
so over my head.
Exactly.
In over my head. Yeah. And it mostly just frustrated. It was also like I stopped going to class. I missed 6 weeks straight of class in my second semester of that year because I was dealing with the shit and I couldn't get out of bed. It was like it was bad. If you want to talk about how little of a shit resident services actually cares about people's mental health, I was a prime example of that. At that
exactly.
Point of the year. Like it was just they didn't care. So sorry, Skulk.
Right. Skulk.
So halfway through Skulk, we start to have these events that in Skulk that were involved chants. And each floor got to make up their chants and go to the ice rink and do it, blah, blah, blah.
And that was opening ceremonies was for Skulk was that chance, right? It didn't,
And then
but it just bubbled under because nobody said nothing. Nobody complained, right? Like that was the least offensive of the shit we did, right? Like we were definitely pushing limits, but sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
It just so happens that Trent, you know, the squared square, his back little porch opened up near the ice rinks where these chants were being, and he didn't talk to me about it, didn't talk to Maggie about it, and like Maggie got, you know, she should have told him these were happening, but I think it was ridiculous too. I think that she got a shit end of the stick as well. And
to back this up, I don't actually think Trent heard them. I think that was a cover story to take the heat off of this one RA that was part of it, that was doing the chants down there, but then went to him after and said, I didn't feel comfortable while I was there, and kind of ratted us all out. And it was very much, and that was the story that came out, that Trent just happened to be around and heard it, but I don't think that was true. And in that girl's defense that made that move, I mean, she unfortunately paid dearly for it, right? Like the public sentiment around Lister of the people that knew that, even with this cover story, it was not good. But you know, you make mistakes when you're young. You just make, you know, you think you're doing that. You've been told all year to report all these things. If you see anything that can get the LHSA shut down, you know, you're the Gestapo, you're our eyes and ears, and then they run back to them. But just to watch her walk through the halls of Henday Tower after that was just, you know, like, what were you thinking? Like,
I mean, does it take you till your 20s to figure out, hey, if you rat out all your friends for doing something that's not
fun,
harming anyone,
exactly, that they're not going to like it. Yeah, you're right.
I get maybe socially she had different priorities, but I don't get it. I think it was whatever.
Point being is that anyways, these chants got back to res services of the content of them.
And the chants themselves, the ones that were, you know, often done, were not run by res services,
right?
So they had not had the chance.
Yeah, it wasn't even really the content. It was just that it wasn't run by them. It was just something they were looking for, right?
Well, I mean, and then it was the content, but
it didn't help. Yeah, it didn't help.
Like I don't even remember any of them.
Oh, I do. I probably shouldn't repeat them. I mean, I just remember, I mean, there was, I think everybody did a chant that they came up with, but it was also the Henday chants, right? Like the Henday chants that have been chanted since the fucking 70s that are part of the history.
Remind me.
Okay.
Remind me some of the Henday ones.
Oh, I mean, you're fair. I once knew a girl from Mackenzie Tower. I mean, that's an old faithful, Henday sucks. You know, that was, you know, we kind of co-opted that one, I think, a little bit.
I'm a
Oh,
bastard. I'm a
yeah.
bastard. I'm a bastard.
I'll admit, but I'd rather be a bastard than a
than a
hen
hen
day
day piece of
piece of
shit.
shit. Yeah.
Yeah. All
Shit
right.
like that, right? Like all those ones. And then, but some of them are, derogatory to some of the other towers. About probably 80% of them are derogatory towards hen day. And that's just what hen day was. And we love that shit. We love that people hated us and we love to be that. And that kind of was the essence of what hen day was for so many years. But some, like you say, some of those chants, like they weren't mean, and they were said all the time. Every night you go to Duke's, you'd hear those chants and people would chant them back, and then people would start a Henday sucks chant at Henday, and then Henday, everyone Henday there would say it twice as loud back to them after, right? Like that was just the dynamic. It was something so minuscule and something so, for them to take that, like we said, there was that sword dangling. They could have cut that at any time. They would just chose this as their one route off of it. But
you're right in that the content didn't really matter, because it came out that it was like, oh, a chant is a call and repeat thing. If you're calling it, people will feel coerced to repeat it.
Right.
And like that was enough. So we had to take this to Frank Robinson, dean of students. And I had Frank sit down with Frank Robinson, freaking Sarah Wolgamuth, Chris and Trent. And they said, so we're going to shut down all the
tower events.
And I was like, okay, hold your horses. What if I cancel Skulk? Which was, not something I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Skulk had run for, decades beforehand without trouble. But like, okay, we get it. Maggie has not given you the information you wanted to see. Right. Trent was looking for it. Like had any of the other RCs tried to find an issue, they would have found them.
Yeah.
But Trent was didn't want to work with her and didn't
and there were so many other things in that, and that would have happened. I mean, in Maggie's defense, because I love the spirit of what she did it with, there was things in there that she also didn't run by them, because like that was the opening ceremonies, but this all happened behind the scenes where we still did a couple more days of Skulk before it got shut down. And there was things in there that if it made it back to Trent, it was going to have the same result anyway. So it was probably just luck of the draw that it was the chants and the opening ceremonies that drew the ire, and maybe not some of the other things. But,
she was the only one that was trying to like sneak things through.
Right. Which, I love and I hate. I hate what had happened, but I love the spirit of it.
The hand was forced. I get it. I think it was all bullshit too, but so we had to do that, and it was not a good time. Mm-hmm. And put that out. I think we spread that around on Facebook.
Yeah, I think all the SCs let their floors know that Skulk's canceled, and
then we Scott Vernelli, being a little angel, offered to take every floor. Their alternate floor could hop in on
Kelsey on King Louis, right?
With their Kelsey equivalent, which was wonderful. I'm glad that and a lot of people ended up taking him up on that,
right?
Which was unnecessary for him to do, and
especially between Henday and Kelsey, with just like the old rivalries
that is the traditional rivalry, right?
Yeah, and for that to be and for it to be Skulk that got canceled, because Skulk, of all the tower events, I mean, they all meant something, and I think this is probably Homer bias of what Skulk was, but I think Skulk, compared to all the other tower events, held even a little bit of more mystique aura, because when first years would come in, all they would hear is just Skulk is coming, right? And you wouldn't tell them what is Skulk. No, it's coming. Skulk is coming, right? And that's all they'd hear: Skulk is coming, Skulk is coming. It's just kind of this aura of what they built it up, and it had this mystique to it, right? And then for it to get canceled, it to be the one that fell out of all of them, it was, had the, I mean, again, this is probably Homerism, but the most mystique and the most history behind it. And then that was awesome of Scott to step up and let us do that. But I think at that point, lots of people did take him up on it, but I think also lots of other people were so down about it, were so disappointed, because, and not even, it was less so of the actual Skulk being canceled. It was more so of, this is the continuation of 2 years of just crackdown and unreasonable, not listening to us, and just, thing after thing after thing. And then for, one of the biggest events of the year, if not the biggest event of the year for all these kids, get canceled on them for and when it came out that it was those chants that everyone heard that we hear all the time, it was like, come the fuck on. Like, who do you think we are? Like, I know you think we're 12, but now you're thinking we're 3. Like, we can't even handle some chants, like easy. Right. And it was just, everyone was so disappointed. Right. And that's not even where it ended. That was just the start of our, start of our worries and the start of the battle, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, well, Maggie, I forget the order of things. I believe it was, she was getting evicted, so we had to let her go or let her resign or whatnot.
Right.
Like, things didn't end great with Maggie and I regret that, because she's great as well. I just I was stressed out about everything.
Yeah. And you had a million things on your plate, and that was just one.
Yeah.
And also just with all the work that you guys put in to make sure that everything was run by them, so you could, the fact that, even though the spirit of it, like I said, I love that spirit, and I can't really say too much, because I think if I was in Maggie's position, I would have been that person that was trying to take you through. Like, I am that shit disturber. I would have done the same thing, but I can imagine you and your exec team, I don't have to imagine. I was in those meetings. I know the frustration that was there. And it was, just all the hours and hours that got put in to not do that, to have somebody do it and then have it crumble for everyone else. And then all the things that came from it. It was unfortunate. It was, it's funny to look back now with all these years separating it, and you can see both sides and you have some compassion in it. But in that moment, there was not a lot of compassion to be had. Right. It was,
so that's what started my 6 weeks of not going to class.
Right. Right.
And so then we had to all of a sudden hire a few more floor coordinators, because Jen Meyer stood up to be the new VP.
Yeah.
Hende.
And I think we were still even rehiring, because it wasn't that big of a time gap between Trevor and Arth getting
Oh no. Planning, it was I remember we hired 3 at once.
Yeah.
Like, it was all pretty immediate. It was a whole mess. And we finished the rest of the tower events, all of which were, hamstrung a lot, as you said, because we had to extremely limit how much shit we could do. Like, we weren't doing any of the haircuts, we weren't doing the tattoos, we weren't doing any of that stuff.
I don't even think we could do the outside events of hiding the FCs, because it was dangerous or something. Like, it could, it could have been hazing to force people to go outside or something. Like,
we could do it. We just had to limit the amount of people allowed to be involved, so it would never encourage everyone to be doing things.
Right.
So you couldn't have, get as many people from your floor to do something, because then they would pressure a person on the floor to do it, even if they didn't want to.
Which of all the things that's kind of reasonable. And if it was requests like that, like, oh yeah, it'd be reasonable, but it just didn't end there. It was like 1 out of 10 were reasonable.
We had that in my first year too. Like, when it was getting a tattoo, it was like, hey, 3 people on your floor can get a tattoo, and you can get points for 3 people, but nothing more.
Yeah, so that it doesn't encourage people. It's only the ones that really want to do it. And there's tons of floors that didn't have anybody that did it.
And it's not like 2 people can be like, hey, you get a tattoo, when there's 38 people not getting a tattoo.
Right.
You can't haze people like that. But yeah, so if it was everyone get a tattoo, that could cause some problems. Mm-hmm. We weren't doing that in the first place. But yeah, we got through the tower events, and that was fine. But immediately we had this sudden impasse between us and Dean of Students and Assistant Dean of Students, or whatever Sarah Wolkomuth was, and then Head of Lister and all the RCs, that kind of was impassable. But hey, where's the line? Where are we allowed to be people? And this is where we started pulling up these arguments, being like, every faculty has chants.
Yeah.
Why are they allowed to do chants during a week of welcome? That's hazing.
Yeah.
And we started to push back on them a little bit, and ended up taking it to the court. So the court cases were around the actual consultation being that we were an extension of the Students' Union, and they weren't allowed to shut us down, because this is where they formally started to try and shut us down.
Right. Yeah, it was shortly after that Skull getting shut down that they were coming for the LHSA in mass, that we want the LHSA shut down. We don't want them to be anything anymore. And that was what really scared people, because everyone thought like, oh, they'll put this in. But what makes Lister special is the LHSA and all the accompanying. And at that time, the LDL was part of it, right? And that was kind of when that happened. Of, oh, you guys better, get your own insurance, get all your constitution stuff taken out so that you have no mention of the LHSA, because we're gonna fight like hell to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. But just on the off chance that it does, but people didn't know that at that time. They thought like, holy man, Red Services it's going to get rid of all the FCs. It's going to get rid of the LDL. It's going to be like, what is Lister going to be? Right. And it just caused a lot of uproar and a lot of pressure on you, I would imagine, because now you're the only one stemming the tide of all that uproar.
So a little side note, during all this time, I was also part of the RHA, which is the Residence Halls Association.
Right.
Which was all the different residences of the U of A. The biggest one by far was Lister, but there was like East
Campus
and
Hub
and the ones in the South, and
those ones,
McKernan something like McKernan Towers or something, like graduate residence.
That sounds right.
iHouse, like there's a bunch of the different residences, and each one had this seat at this table, and every resident at the U of A paid $5 to be part of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was doing this, I was talking to Patrick, the president at the time, being like, hey, like, what can you do? Oh, no, because we were an observing member. We weren't paying $5 to be in it. And he was like, hey, like, do you remember that meeting, that joint council meeting he came to?
I think I do, because I remember this Patrick guy. Yeah.
So at the time, Lister was exempt from these fees because we had left them because they were silly and we got no benefits from them. And it was like $5 a student, not a giant deal.
And we had our own $5 a student just for Lister residents. That
$75 a student for the LHSA.
Right. That's what I meant.
An additional $5 for the RJ. It wasn't a huge deal, but we saw zero benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
So we had left at the end of my first year. That was a big thing that we had passed to the university. Patrick had asked to come speak to the LHSA, like, hey, I want you guys to rejoin this. And I said, okay, I don't think anyone wants to, but you can come to our joint council meeting and make his case. And I just remember it was a bloodbath. It was it was like an hour longer. And I told him beforehand, I was like, man, you gotta be prepared. These people don't want this. Yeah. You have to come like forward with good, tangible examples of like what the hell you're going to give them. If they pay this $5, and it just got torn apart. Anyways, I remember asking him at these meetings, like, "Hey, what can you do to help out this residence issue? Like the biggest residence issue happening on campus. You're the president of the RHA.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do about it?" And he said nothing. And then I vowed to myself, okay, this is a useless organization. Yeah. I'm going to run to be president of this organization, and I'm going to shut it down. It's just a waste of
the ground. Yeah.
And in my fourth year, I was president of the RHA, and I successfully shut it down.
Beautiful.
It was a waste of students' money.
Yeah.
So that was like us appealing to them. So we just went straight to the students' union, and it was we had a lot of financial support from them, especially around lawyers.
Yeah, because that was the thing. They were taking us. It was going to court, and where are we going to pay for that? Yeah, the students
tens of thousands of dollars of legal fees that we had to continually get support from them. It was Pedros.
That name sounds super familiar.
Pedros Kusumu, I believe.
That sounds really familiar.
President of the Students' Union, followed by William Lau.
Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, and I had pretty regular meetings with them trying to figure out what the hell we were doing, because that was a whole mess. And Mark and a bunch of other steadfast members of the Students' Union that, the university's plan was they have an institutional memory, and we as 1 year people in these positions don't. So they can, if they don't like the person who's in a position, they can wait a year and then do the shit later.
Which it seemed like what they were kind of trying to do with Eric, and then they ran into you, and then they're like, oh, well, we can just wait another year. And then they kind of ran into T, and it kind of just got to the point where it said, oh, this is not something that it's almost like the Thanos quote. As long as people are there to remember what was, they will never be okay with what, could be or whatever it is. And it holds true. People remembered what Lister was and fought for it, and they cared about it. And they were not successful as they probably have been millions of times before, just waiting that year and going forward. But it was that fight that everyone was behind and going to take it to the nth degree. And I think they were maybe a little bit surprised by that because their usual tactics weren't working for them.
No. And like it, it was little bits every year that they were able to slip through.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we ended up being in court with them. I ended up being in a bunch of, so I got my appeal here.
Oh, nice.
Appeal of the March 10th, 2014 decision by the Office of Student Judicial Affairs on the List All Students Association. Oh, Deborah Erkes.
Are you just going down memory lane right now?
I totally forgot about this. Oh my God. We haven't even touched on the, did you have to talk to the cops?
Did I have to talk to the cops?
Yeah.
I don't think so, but first that rings a bell. Why were people talking to cops? Because I remember that coming up.
Oh, Officer Tony something or other. Okay, I don't want to say his full name.
It's Tony Soprano. That's who it was.
Officer Tony Soprano. I remember his full name too. This piece of shit, abusive university cop that would pull people into these rooms, like students, and tell them that they were about to get expelled.
Yeah, he was
run them through these things, and then like abuse them verbally, and like call them like gay and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, this terrible, vindictive, like violent investigation of student affairs to try and prove that the LHSA was hazing people.
Yeah.
And then run by this Office of Student Judicial Affairs officer Deb that filed this just heinous, stupid report. Just these people that like their parents didn't love them enough, so they wanted to
take note on the world.
Yeah, just awful folks. I know if there's anyone listening that got deposed or whatever by this officer, they were screaming at their screen right now because what a fucking dick this guy was.
Yeah, I remember talking to maybe I'm gonna have to ask her because it might not be Yelena, but it was either Yelena or somebody else that was an FC at the time, and just seeing them in tears, and I went out like, oh, what happened? Like, are you okay? And they explained to me, oh, this guy took me in, he's telling me I'm gonna, and I was like, who the fuck is this guy? But just seeing like the emotional wreck that they were coming out of that, and maybe it wasn't Yelena because I don't know if she was even involved at that time, but man, it was someone, it was female, and they were part of the LHSA, and I just saw them in like full on meltdown mode, and I was like, what happened? And yeah, they said that cop went through and gave him the gears, but fuck that guy. Yeah. So was that a separate issue than kind of res services going after it, or was that more of the same thing? Is that one of the tactics they used to try and go after the LHSA?
It was part of the whole thing.
Okay.
Like they this was such a wide encompassing thing. They collected quote unquote evidence about, like, including memes on Facebook.
Oh yeah.
About the LHSA and stuff like that. Like things that they thought were these smoking guns of, like, look at the perception of Lister, and it's like, okay, right. You don't understand what a meme is. You don't like, you can't possibly, it was, none of it was
and you can't try and pull reason out of memes and stuff and trying to show intent on it. Like,
none of their arguments were good faith.
No, not at all. There was not a good faith argument to be had between the Lister Hall Student Association and anybody at the university from the time that I got there to the time that I left, in all honesty. And not to disrupt it, but do you want to just make sure that your mic is not rubbing on your shirt? It's just make a loud noise as soon as you lean back there. But anyway, sorry.
There we go. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No, all good. Yeah, no. Anyway, so it was this Office of Student Judicial Affairs officer ended up, after all this contrary evidence, and I had to see her all the time and talk to lawyers beforehand and do all the stuff. Like,
I remember seeing you during that time. You looked like you were just like barely holding on. Like the look in your eyes during that time specifically. I remember that time when you were going in and out of them is towards the end of the year, and it was wild. It was something to see, and that's the effect of how can they not see this in your face? Like, how can they not see what they're doing to these kids? You know, like we're kids at that point fighting against these adults with all this power that hold all the cards and what they're doing to people. And the fact that we wouldn't give up, that they just kept pushing harder and not saying, hey, maybe they do stand for something. They do have something that they, if they care enough to go through this stuff, maybe we should listen to them. They just double down on these guys don't know what they're talking about. It can't be worth it that much. Like, fuck, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. And ended up, we put in this appeal and we were able to have this big appeal process.
Yeah.
What was it? One professor, one undergraduate student, one graduate student, and this board of folks, and
that was when a decision was already made and we were appealing it at that point.
Yeah, because
what was the decision to be made? Was that they were shutting the LHSA down?
That due to hazing, the LHSA was going to enter into a multi-year probation or discontinued for multiple years, then on a probationary status.
To come back, right? Yeah. So is they were going to be gone for 2? I don't know if the years are right, but it was like, they'd be nothing for 2 years, then 2 years of probationary, then like 2 years of like medium probation, and then they'd be fully reinstated or something.
Yeah, and you know the saddest part about it was, oh my god, I forgot I wrote a 12-page just rant about what the oh my god.
Oh man, maybe we might have to post some addendums to this just to go with it.
I totally forgot about even writing documents. This. I was so angry.
I bet you there's some real venom in there at points.
Yeah.
So then you were going through those appeals, and I mean, there was still, because T was the president the next year, right? So there was still an association, or was it still in the appeals?
We were in the appeals process. It was a long process. So So also the Office of Student Judicial Affairs officer was also the acting dean of students at the time. Crazy conflict. It was a mess. So yeah, I ended up stopping. We put in our appeal on March the 10th, 2014. I, as of May 1st, so a month and a bit later, was no longer president. T was president. Right. He was, an FC with us and one of my VPs. Mm-hmm. A dear friend to this day. He wasn't my FC in my first year, but our dodgeball team. So we were 6K and he was 9K, and he was the FC of 9K. And he was actually one of the first people I met when I moved in, because I think he had maybe known my sister or something. Just in an elevator, he was kind of, took me under his wing, and just, he was one of my first good buddies in Lister too. Still one of my good buddies to this day. He's actually probably going to be on the podcast here soon too, so people get to know our friend T. He's quite the guy. Yeah. So he was taken over, and and I was going to be speaker of that year. So I was going to stick around with the LHSA at least a little bit, just to help the continuation of it all. As we briefly mentioned before, the institutional memory of Lister was limited to the people that were in the organization the year before, and that changeover was so broad that it required there to be an immense amount of record keeping and previous experience to carry the stuff over. Right. A 2-year cessation of all activity, like that's a death sentence. It's a death. And something also we forgot to tell is that throughout this process from my first year on, was every year they put more rules in to have less returners, right? So it used to be where if you wanted to return, you could, right? If Lister impacted you and you wanted to come, you could go back all 4 years. But then they made it so you needed to have a position the next year. Okay, now they've cut down the positions. Now you can only really come back if you're an FC or an RA, and then they're trying to get rid of the FC. So not only were they relying on that institutional memory that if we can get it gone for a couple of years, there'll be nobody left to pick up that torch and reignite it at the end. But they were also trying to make sure that there wasn't even people to give this groundswell of support to even know what know what it was that we're fighting for. And it was just so sneaky the way they went about it, and just how much damage that did to what made Lister special, because it was that family that got to see what it was for them that would then come back and create that for the next year's people. And now that you take that out and it's just all first years, it's just a shit mess. It's like throwing just 40 18-year-olds together on a floor, and then 10 floors of them, and just hope that nothing goes wrong. Like, fuck, that is just a recipe for disaster. So sorry, carry on. Your transition to T, they're relying on it to kind of crumble. addendum to my previous mention of like I forgot about everything that actually went on. The ice rinks was number 4 in my list of problematic things that the discipline officer referenced.
Oh, like the chance. So there was 3
there was
issues.
The dance performance, the video, the floor chants, and then the ice rink chants.
Right.
All of, oh my God. I
wrote the dance that they did. Oh my God, that was fucking funny. Holy Christ. So out at the all the FCs and the VP Maggie all made this. I don't know if it was like a recurring dance that they did every year. That was kind of a handy thing, or if they created it, but it was the most obscene, fucking hilarious. Oh, that's what it was. Now my memory. So it was the dance that got ratted out by that girl that came through, and that was the first thing. That was the opening, and then I think Trent did hear the chants. I think it was that. That's what I must have.
And the video that was shown.
Right. Yeah. I don't remember what the video was, but it's probably pretty.
Neither do I. I don't
it's probably pretty obscene. They probably had a fair point on that one, but that's whatever. The thing. We're adults. Like, fuck you. I just can't imagine that they think they know better of what people can handle than, like, especially when you're that far removed from it. You haven't been. When was the last time you were 18 in a place like Lister? The people that are making these calls that are fucking 70 years old.
Yeah. No. Oh yeah. So, anyways, T took over, and I started going to class again, and we got through that whole bullshit. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I got through that bullshit, and then we finally moved out of Lister, and things kept going downhill. T was hit with way more restrictions. They had no drinking events. They had I don't even think they had tower events.
No, I don't think so. I think it was kind of locked right down. Maybe they did have tower events, but it was run. I can't even remember, but it was much a different year.
I think there were.
There might have been. I was in Schaefer at that point, and I was not going to be bothered to go do Valhalla. I mean, I kind of was over it after Skull got canceled. That was kind of the last straw to me. It was like, whatever, neutered version of what this used to be, I don't want to be a part of it, because I was one of the only people in Lister that would, at that point in my third year, I was one of the only people that had been in a real tower event, like not the neutered version that people went through under your with having to run everything by them, but a real one the year before, which, talking to other people, was a neutered version of the one before that, and it was kind of a current stream. But I was probably one of the only people in Lister that, other than like the VPs, that remembered it, right? Like, and that's what they were going for, was they don't want people to remember it. They wanted it to be a fresh slate. Everybody's coming into it, right? So, but no, T was under a lot of stress too, and a lot of court cases and in and out and lawyers and bullshit, and fuck, it was not a fun fight even after you had moved out.
Yeah, to get like deposed. like go to a deposition. It was and then at the end of my president year was when they finally brought forward, oh hey, we're gonna paint over everything,
right? All the murals and everything, and all the history and in the tunnels and all that.
Yeah, and I was just livid. And they promised they were going to take high def photos and create some sort of book. That never fucking happened.
Fuck them.
God, they white painted it all, and it was just.
And then they painted these big rainbows down the whole thing. Every time that last year that I was there, after they painted over everything, every time I walked down those hallways, if I had a pen, if I had a book, I would just scrape as hard as I could down those hallways, trying to chip the paint and fuck with those hallways every time I walked through them. Even to this day, when I graduated, when I was going to my graduation, I went and brought a case of beers, had a shotgun at my door by 6K, had a shotgun by 7 Henday, 3 Schafe, and then 4 Schafe, and then had one by Carter's Memorial there, had one with my boy. And like, even then, like, going through all those hallways, I'm just trying to fuck with those walls as much as possible. Like, every time, and anybody that listens to this that goes to Lister in the future, please continue that tradition of fucking with those halls and the paint. And if you happen to have a little key on you, just take a good chunk out of those fucking walls, because of what that used to be underneath those. It's
if you chip off enough, you might see some culture below.
You might exactly, which is probably a metaphor for the entire university, right? If you scratch hard enough, you might see what it used to be, but you're gonna have to dig deep, because it's definitely not the place it should have been, and not the place that the people that it means something to would want it to be.
Yeah,
say that politely.
And like I've chatted recently, and so T had his year, and I was still moderately involved.
And he was going through the appeals process, and then at the end of his year, what was the response? Because I don't know if the LHSA was even.
it was still around technically. Leela got hired on to be not my girlfriend Leela, other Leela, got hired on to be the next president, and she made it most
Oh,
of the way through
right.
the
I remember that now.
summer before they finally went through with the shutdown.
Right.
And it was a couple years, and then I actually got contacted by some I don't want to say kids, some young adults, while they were reestablishing it.
Oh, so is the LHSA coming back? I'd heard some rumblings that they were trying.
The LHSA is back, I believe. The whole problem with it was like LHSA had, a $230,000 budget. We had 70 employees and a well-run amount of like office space and infrastructure and stuff that we had,
meeting rooms and
like booking privileges, and there was an institutional memory, and it all really disappeared when we stopped being there. And I kind of got jaded about it, and I tried to help out these folks to reestablish that because we were a registered society, so we to pay taxes as a nonprofit,
right?
Like there's all the stuff that we had to do and tried to keep up, and it just became way more and more difficult. And I think now there is still an LHSA, but it is
much different than what it was once upon a time.
Yeah, and I hope that they they flourish and they make it.
Yeah. You want it to be. You want that specialness that we experience to live on in some form. And I think just getting that many people that are that youthful and full of piss and vinegar in an area, it's going to create that in some way or another, right? We just had it finely tuned to take that raw energy of these young people and make it into something positive, right? And I mean, I guess that's in the eye of the beholder of whether it's positive or negative. And obviously they saw it in a different light. But I think that having something like the LHSA come back, it might not be the same, but I think over time it will slowly begin to take on some of those things. No, but it can't, because they won't let it. They anything that starts to even smell like what it used to be, they'll stomp it out right away. I wonder who the current LHSA president is. I wonder if we could get them on the podcast to talk about what they're going through and see how close it is to what it used to be.
Let me check my Facebook Messenger. One of them
got in touch with. Oh, that'd be cool. That'd be an interesting dynamic to have you, T, and Eric on to talk about those 3 years, the kind of the last 3 years of the LHSA, and then have the new guy on, or new girl, whoever it is, to come tell us about the future of it and see what kind of ideas they have. That'd be very interesting.
Yeah, let me search Messenger LHSA. They not let you search through your.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big Facebook guy, and I don't even know how half of this stuff works. This whole thing of building a podcast and trying to market it with social media and that, it's really highlighted the amount of ignorance I have by getting so jaded with social media at such a young age, like by Facebook before Instagram was even around, of just realizing kind of that I just completely backed off and only used it for the parts that were useful to me and really didn't dive into it. And now that I'm actually forced to go back onto it and use it again, I just find I have no idea how any of this shit works, right? Like Instagram stories, it takes me like 20 minutes to post one. It's half the time I just got to ask my girlfriend how to do everything, and then just, have them saved. And I just know, okay, tomorrow I'm just going to hit post on this one. I have it ready made and I don't have to worry about it. But
all right. Okay. I found him.
Oh yeah.
Wahab Kadeli.
Well, you may have to spell that out for me after the podcast, because I don't know if I can look that up again. But it'd be a cool experiment to see where it's gone to. But so once you graduated and you had kind of all of it to look back on, what do you think you learned more from, like your engineering degree, like the time in the class, or going through that whole process? And what kind of lessons did that teach you, and what kind of values did that instill in you? Because I can't imagine you would escape something so impactful without taking some things with you on the way out.
Oh goodness. Once again, I didn't spend that much time in class.
Fair enough. Hey, neither did I, and I didn't have a good excuse. So
yeah. I mean, fourth year I got a little bit better about it at least. But no, I learned to have a lot of faith in the people around me. I think that I was unusually surrounded by very inspiring folks, all of whom with I'm great friends with today. Like at no point did any of us feel like we were, fighting for something that we weren't passionate about.
Mhm.
And that was worth so much more than, we'd go up with these arguments time and time against people that, they didn't believe in their arguments. They were just like,
Mhm.
nope, like these are the rules.
Yeah.
And this is how we're going to interpret them because, as blatant as we're going to try and not make it, we don't think the LHSA should be around.
Right.
And I just had such an immense amount of support from people around me that we knew that we were at least like we were doomed. I don't think any of us thought that we were going to win.
Right.
But everyone still wanted to fight on.
Yeah, that was what was most inspiring of being in those meetings and seeing the tears and the pain that everyone in that room went through at each time we hit a wall. But the fact, like you say, that everyone wanted to keep fighting, there was never a moment of doubt with anybody in those rooms that we wanted to keep fighting. And it was funny to be kind of on the other end because I was an LDL exec, but I cared so much about Lister and was so passionate about it. I was, fully in that fight with you guys, when you guys are crying, I was crying. I'm a crybaby. I cry at anything, but stuff that I care about, it was passionate. But you're right that it was hard to see that at the time. But now looking back on it, there's a lot of inspirational people in that room and a lot of lessons in fighting for what matters, even though it's doomed, right? Like that is a characteristic that's hard to find in the world these days, right? Like it's so much of society tells you just to take the easy road, take the easy path. If it gets too hard, quit, right? Like if it becomes insurmountable, if you're going to lose, cut your losses. And to have something like that where you can see like, no, that is what probably all rational thought would tell you to do. But we know that what is right is to not do that and to fight this to the very end and go down with this fucking burning ship. And I was so proud of what we all did and that's one of the big things. Like I wanted to have you on to tell this story to people because this all happened behind closed doors, right? There were certain levels of understanding, like we said at the start, when these changes came out of what was happening in the floor and then what got, or in the actual, battleground and then what was put out to the public. And I think throughout the whole thing, there were certain levels, right? Like people that were in Lister understood it at one level. People that were in these exec meetings, like you and me, understood it to another level. And then when it got out, it just seemed like nothing. Or not nothing, but just they would spin it into these words where we were just these prissy little kids that were fighting over like being able to drink in the lounges, even to the very end. That seems like from people outside of Lister, when you talk to them about it, that's all they understood it as, right? It's just, they just want to be able to drink. This is something, and it
was interesting because there was a different level of understanding at each of the rungs up the ladder. And eventually got to the point where it would be like me and the president of the students union and the dean of students sitting in a room. And everyone would be like, hey, like, this is bullshit. And everyone would agree it's bullshit.
Yeah.
But the dean of students would be like, well, you know what? It's an image problem for the university. So we're going to go forward with this being hazing. Mm-hmm. And we'd have these like open conversations about this.
Right.
And then the next level down would be like us talking to the head of Lister. And they'd be like, no, these are like genuine concerns. But I know that it's all bullshit because I'd just been talking to his.
Just talk to your boss that admitted this is bullshit, right? Yeah.
It's like no, this is, you guys just have a plan for Lister, and the LHSA is not part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. If I actually learned anything from this whole mess, is that there are people that want more than anything to just hold power and be in control and tell people what to do.
Exactly.
Those are not good people.
But that lesson is so important because I think that was a big lesson I got out of that. It's just what people do with power, myself included. Like I said, I wasn't 100% happy. I'm very, I didn't turn into one of those people that really abused it and really took, it's not just the abusing, it's levels, right? Like you don't want people to abuse power, but it's hard not to abuse it. But
have somebody I loved being able to get into the fucking bar at the front of the line and get free drinks at the bar all the time.
Yeah.
And I knew people and people knew me, and it was fun. There's some great parts of being, winning this popularity contest, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But it was never oh, I get to tell people what to do. That was the people that wanted to do that. What the fuck is wrong with them?
Yeah. And there's someone like myself where, I do like telling people what to do, and I know that's in me and I know that, but I also care about people, and I want to tell them what to do because I think I can do good for them, and I want them to do better, right? Like at work, I have employees I have to tell what to do, but it's all in service of a goal. We want to do the best thing, right? It's not, but it's people like Trent that would use their power over people and then take vindictive, glee in doing it. And that is but to understand that that is out there in the world, and that there are people that, I'm going to say 9 out of 10 people won't do good with power. And the only thing that gates it is how much you had to work to earn that power. But when it's handed to you and you haven't had to earn it, it goes south 99 times out of 100, right? And this was exactly what they set up. They gave RAs, they gave RCs, they gave them this power. They didn't have to earn it. They didn't have to get elected. They didn't have to do anything. Whereas the FCs didn't get a quarter of the power, and they still had to be elected. And they had, to be accountable to it.
And interviewed too. Resident services resident services, even after the floor coordinators were independent, didn't give up their control there. They had to have veto power.
Yeah.
Over the students' decision, which is just like they didn't give a shit what the students wanted. Exactly. So I think that pretty much wraps up all the Lister stuff of kind of what I wanted to talk about in your story. And it's just it's funny to listen back on it, all the things you forgot, right? Like I thought I had a pretty good handle on everything, but I forgot like 90% of all that went through. But it was fun to talk about it. But then after you graduated, you got into travel, and I feel like since then, I haven't talked to you much since, we talked all the time in Lister, and then, you go off separate paths, and then you reconvene. And it seems like traveling filled something in your life that you didn't know was missing. And again, stop me if I'm wrong, because I'm putting words in your mouth, but it seemed like you really found a frequency that really vibed with you, and you enjoyed it for all that it was worth. And now to see you kind of back in the country is almost just weird to see. But the question I asked about what did you learn more, in school or going through that, if you could add in the third dimension of the travel you did after university, now where do you think you learned the most? And then if you can just expand on maybe some of your travel, where you went, what you did, what you enjoyed. Well, okay. So right after I graduated, I went and I was in Asia for a couple months, but then I went and lived in Saskatchewan for 2.5 years.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
And I worked in the field as a field engineer.
Right.
For about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And then everyone at my company not everyone, a lot of people at my company got laid off. And so I became a tour guide in Peru, while also on my off time doing contract engineering work in Trinidad.
So now how do you get to Peru? How did you decide on that? How did you become a tour guide? Like, how does that even fall into place? Like that does.
Oh yeah. So the company, I traveled with a company right out of university called Free and Easy Traveler. Great bunch of folks in Asia.
Right.
And they asked me if I wanted to, when I was on the trip, they're like, hey, like we like you, you're good with people, you're comfortable traveling. Yeah, you've got this right personality to be a leader here. Do you want to, start working with us? And I said, hey, I would love to, but I got a career I got to start.
Like, I gotta start being an engineer here.
I've got this house I'm renting in Estevan, Saskatchewan. Like I gotta get on with
Estevan.
Go to the big city, Saskatchewan, and then they're like, well, if anything ever changes, just let us know. So I went to Saskatchewan until I got laid off, and then that day I got laid off, I replied to a 2.5-year-old email. Basically said like, hey, like get back in touch with us if you ever. And I messaged them back and said, hey, like I just got laid off. Like I'm free if you guys need a leader for a couple months or something like that. Little did I know it'd be over a year that I did it, but they said, hey, well, we got nothing available in Asia. What about Peru? Do you know any Spanish? I was like, not really. He's like, can you learn Spanish in the next 2 weeks? And I was like, yeah, I can
figure it out.
Yeah, next 2 weeks.
See,
2 weeks later, I was in Peru.
Holy shit! And how much did you know about Peru before that?
I spent 3 years living in Ecuador when I was younger.
Oh shit!
Between 3 and 6. So so I knew like South America decently well. I'd been to Machu Picchu as a small child.
Yeah,
I'd technically been to Peru. I didn't know much. I knew of like cuy,
fair,
guinea pig, and all that jazz. But I knew like my stepmom is from Ecuador. My stepbrother's from Ecuador. I spent a lot of time down there. I know South American culture quite well. So
right. Which is half the battle.
Tough. It wasn't that tough of a transition. And Yeah. And then I spent a long time doing basically a floor coordinator role, but condensed to these 3-week trips in traveling around Peru. So also being a tour guide. And
So do you know what a Kentucky tour is then? If you're familiar with their company? Is it
so
similar to that at all?
similar, smaller groups. So Kentucky could be like 40, 50 people.
Yeah.
I as small as 9.
Oh, cool. Intimate.
My biggest was 25.
Okay.
And instead of 1 leader, we'd have 2.
Right.
And closer in age to the people, and much more involved in like arranging everything. And always, if like a person wants to go skydiving, one of us goes with them.
Right.
Like we always it wouldn't be like we wouldn't arrange their meals or anything like that. We'd get to a place and be like, hey, here's all the shit you can do. Let us know what you want to do. We'll set it up with you. We'll do it with you. Yeah. Other than that, we'll give you the tools to explore this place on your own.
Yeah.
And you can use us as much or as little as you want. So it was a great company to work for in that sense, and let me travel for almost free, and be with cool, interesting people all the time.
Yeah. I bet you met a lot of people you're still friends with to this day doing that. Hey.
Oh yeah, and it was wonderful. It was it was a big hit to my career progression.
Yeah, hey, but you gotta enjoy that.
No, like I was from a very young age always had travel instilled as a pretty important thing, and I think getting that perspective on the world is like so important that it's it sounds cliche, but traveling is very important.
Yeah,
and
it is.
Everyone should try and travel as much as possible and experience different cultures.
Well, it's funny that we already brought up Yelena on this podcast, because I'm having her on soon, like I said, in a couple of days here. So I'd listened to our first episode, and I tried to pitch to her, and she tore it to pieces immediately, obviously, Yelena, but some way to make travel part of the curriculum for a country, right? Like if someone like Canada realized like this would be super expensive to do, but if we tried to make it so that all of our students at a certain age travel outside of the country, right? And it changed all the time, just how much more human capital like that it'd be a huge monetary investment. But I think the actual growth and what you would bring to your society for having people, step outside that bubble of Canada, or I mean, this would work with any country, but just to see a different culture, and you changed all the time, and just that break of having somebody, you can tell the difference when someone's never left their hometown, right? To that point where they go out and see the big city, metaphorically, of course, right? You can see that difference in them. They're a different person once they go on that trip, right? I went on a Kentucky tour when I knew I was getting this job in Grand Prairie for a month, on 2 separate Kentuckys through Europe by myself. And I was a different person after that, right? And I had traveled a lot, but I traveled with my family. It wasn't that immersive experience of kind of going out on your own, and you're a different person after. And I feel like if we could find a way to facilitate that, I think the not externalities, the opposite externality, like the positive benefits of it would be so huge and so immense that like it would just take somebody trying it, because then it would speak for itself and be like, oh, this is so amazing, we can't ever stop this, right? And it fell apart on the logistics.
It's hard for your empathy, as a human of the planet, and not just like whatever
exactly
class and place you grew up in. Like it is if you go and you see how what the average person in Thailand does not live like the average person in Canada. The average person in like Bolivia has a very different life and opportunities given afforded to them than even than the average person in Peru. Like even these regional differences of places that are so close have such diversity that is essential to try and go out and see all those places. Although I can imagine Yelena shutting that down. She already pays 55% taxes in Belgium.
Yeah.
So
her main argument was just, how are you going to pay for it, right? And just as you were talking, actually my mind was racing, because I hadn't really thought of this idea since then. But what I was just thinking is, if you set it up where you had did it as an exchange program, where you kind of had all your grade 6s across Canada, and you had like buses and kind of coordinated events where every year it happens where if you picked Ecuador for that, you know, and you send all these kids to Ecuador for that year, and they would have to, you know, plan it out a couple years in advance that they're getting this big load of kids and they're going to send a big load of kids to Canada, and we'd have it set up because now Canada, if they did it every year, they'd have that same infrastructure for these kids from whatever country to come in. And all it would take is to plan out a couple years like the Olympics, right? You know, you're going to get the Olympics in 2028. You start building facilities and planning for it before. But if you do that as an exchange, where if Canada just knows we're going to do it every year with our grade sixes and we're going to send them, but it'll be a different place every year, that would cut down some of the costs because now it's reciprocal and they're paying for some of the infrastructure to have host your kids and they're getting something out of it, and you reciprocate the travel. So that's just the next elevation of my idea there. Maybe there's something there. Who knows?
I mean, even on the idea of you know, traveling around a lot as younger people and getting that experience, I was super fortunate to do a program after I finished grade 12 called Class Afloat, where I hopped on a tall ship and sailed around the world while doing school.
Holy shit.
I finished high school a semester early, so I was able to do it in the second half of grade 12, but it was meant for kids who were, you know, do your grade 10, do your grade 11, do your grade 12 on the ship. And, you know, you travel to 20 different countries and you spend all of your other time doing physical labor on a ship.
So you're telling me you're a seaman?
Yeah. An ordinary seaman.
Ordinary seaman, guaranteed.
Yeah. Just, but like, you know, you work your ass off as a deckhand, and you're in tight quarters with already a multicultural crew, like a lot of Canadians and, you know,
Australians, I'm gonna guess,
based out of Canada, but there's some Americans. It was a Norwegian ship. All the crew were Swedes and Danish and British, and, you know, we had a Bermudan and Bermudan,
sounds about right.
And then you go around the world and you go to these countries and you do service projects there, and you really see a whole bunch of different sides of, you know, how, you know, your equivalent will live in a different part of the world. And it's a shame because this program was prohibitively expensive.
Oh, I bet.
Silly, and I'm more than fortunate, and, you know, it's something that I hope that I can provide for my kids someday. But like, it is that is the most I've grown from anything. Like, I got more out of that than I did out of any engineering thing or any LHSA thing or any solo travel, even, because you know, at the same time I was learning all this stuff with a bunch of people that were also learning all that stuff.
Right. So that's amazing. That's so good to hear. And I feel like, you know, the more we could do that for people, the better off we'd be. So getting back to the Peru stuff, what were some of the cooler things you got to do during that? I mean, I'm sure there was kind of some set stuff, like he's mentioned skydiving, but what was some of your personal favorites that you got to experience?
I never actually went skydiving in Peru.
Fair enough.
I bungee jumped a couple times. I did like parasailing. You know, I've been to Machu Picchu 10 times.
Oh, nice.
We did some big hikes, a giant overnight hike into Colca Canyon, which is one of the deepest canyons in the world. And it is this trying, difficult thing that you get to see so many people struggle through and push themselves and achieve something that they probably didn't think they would get to. The entire culture in Peru is just fascinating, because you are looking at this place that is, you know, it's one of the cradles of civilization that developed pretty much independently. You know, you've got Norte Chico in Peru, you had the Central America, you had Indus River Valley, China, Egypt, Mesopotamia. I think that's all of them.
Yeah.
And so you had this culture that developed, instead of being this coastal river-based culture, it had a little bit of river things on the Urubamba River in Peru, but it was this culture based out of the steppes in the middle of the Andes.
High elevation. And
they hadn't invented the wheel, and they didn't have a codified writing system, and they were this gigantic empire. The Inca Empire, the Inca Empire only lasted, I think, 97 years. Hopefully there's no
history
archaeologists that can count me wrong, but this amazing culture that developed, that people often, I mean, especially it's North American attitude to think that, like, oh, a bunch of indigenous cultures probably just got snuffed out. That's what happened in North America. You know, it's a giant shame, but there's a lot more intermingling of cultures in South America than there was in North America. So you have this mestizo population that like I think it's the third most popular language with 20 million native speakers is Quechua. It doesn't even have unified spelling system. And it is just, it's amazing how ever present this culture is that has been intertwined into every aspect of life there. And the design of their cities, like everything about Peru is fantastic. I cannot express my love for that place enough.
Oh, that's cool. And I bet with that much rich history and like you say, just their own band of, almost evolution in itself, you see so much uniqueness to just, there's many ways to accomplish the same goal. But when you have that, uniformity across where, you have one practice that kind of dominates all the other ones and just spreads across culture. When you're isolated like that, you find your own ways and you find, new arcs of how to get there and tools and architecture and stuff.
The vast majority of this empire was run from 3,400 meters above sea level.
Yeah.
Like the average Quechua person, I was reading a study about this. They have like double the blood oxygenation. Because, just to be able
to survive at that elevation.
Yeah, it is absurd. It is amazing. It's I remember thinking it would be a lot more, because I grew up in Ecuador, or spent some years in Ecuador, and I remember it being very Spanish, and of course Spanish. But I remember then after spending some time in Peru, I did some solo travel into Bolivia, and I got off of the bus in La Paz in Bolivia. I was trying to get to another place, and I hopped into this cab, and I started to speak to this person in, broken Spanish, and he didn't speak any Spanish. He only spoke Quechua. And that's like, I had this preconceived notion of like, oh, it is, Spanish country, everything's Spanish there. But there is such a vibrant, indigenous culture there that has, its roots way deeper than any, Christian Spaniards were able to wipe away. So,
right. It's cool to see it as hard as they try. And it probably is, metaphorically apt to our discussion before of, as hard as you try to wipe out a culture, it's very tough. It's hard when people believe in it and they want to, they care passionately about it. They're going to bring that fire. It's like trying to, after a forest fire, trying to put out all those embers that are burning underneath that can reignite, right? It's always there. And it's interesting to me anyways. Maybe one question I have, and this might be a bit of me grasping because I have an answer I want you to give, but as you brought people through and kind of took people on trips and stuff, was there any country where the people that came through stood above the rest as more fun? The ones that if you saw somebody coming from this country, what I hope people would think about Canadians as, because during my Kentucky tours, there was one country that stood out above all the rest of, I just couldn't get enough of these people. I would move there in a heartbeat and I love them. And I was curious if you had seen the same thing, if you had to take a guess at what country you think maybe I'm referring to.
So the vast majority of the people that I would take on my trips were Canadian.
Oh, well, that kind of defeats the purpose of it. But.
It's a Calgary-based company. So
cool. I didn't realize that. Oh, well, that makes way more sense.
Are you going for Australians?
I am going for Australians.
Yeah,
fucking right. I'm going for Australians.
Always fun, always great. I had some like wonderful Australian pals. I only had a few Australians on any of my trips, though.
Oh yeah,
but they were always
I just found I'm just trying to figure out what it is about Australia that makes that special, and I feel like it's hard to put to words. I feel like I understand it a lot more than I'm able to articulate. And I feel like one time I was actually talking to my uncle and I can't remember where we landed, but he put it so well of exactly what it is that keeps them there. And I feel like you can see it in the response to this coronavirus and stuff and how much they're pushing right back on China. And they said, hey, we want to have some details about this. We're not trusting the shit you say. We're pushing back. They've been just, so they have such a spirit of individuality and of not rolling over and of not falling for, these narratives that kind of the whole world falls under of just, hey, this is how it works. And Australia always kind of, I don't know, that doesn't seem right to me. And I just love that about them. And it really comes through in their people and just how much fun they are and how, that tall poppy, whatever they have there, where, if anybody tries to stand up above the rest, they get cut down by the crew, everyone's equal, and just what that brings forward. I see a lot of what is good about Canada, and I feel like Canada's kind of losing, is still alive and well in Australia. And I can't exactly articulate what that is, but I just love it so much. And I feel like the more people that understand it, and the more people that needs to travel to Australia to get a taste of that, and, do a backpacking trip for 3 months in Australia to come back as better people, the amount of people I know that is the case for, it's just, what Peru is to you maybe is my Australia.
It's on my list, honestly. Something about the Southern Hemisphere, man.
Yeah, it has a pull to you, hey?
I gotta do an Australia trip and a New Zealand trip. Actually, I would love to do as well.
Well, you're gonna have to.
I gotta go see Hobbiton.
Yeah, fair enough. Hey, yeah. Oh man, well, you're gonna have to do some work in here. You're about to enter the work world again here on Monday. It's are you excited?
I am excited. Yeah, I'm no longer gonna be a barista.
Oh, hey, well.
I'm really good at making coffee again.
Fair enough.
But I'm really excited. It's gonna be a nice return to form, I think.
Yeah.
I can take the time to go travel. Now that I can make money to go to.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta recoup the finances to make that happen. Yeah. So is there anything about that whole listener experience that we missed that we didn't cover? Because I think I have one last question just to ask you, just to kind of wrap it all up, but I don't know if we missed anything in between that we didn't cover. I'm sure we did.
Yeah, you know what? I think we covered pretty much all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Every single person I worked with was outstanding in their own way, and
Mm-hmm.
it was honestly a group effort through every single thing. I had so much freaking support from all those guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was as much of a mess as it was, and how much we didn't
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, win. It was a blast.
Yeah,
and it was worth it. Despite
for sure. And as much as we didn't win, I think all the people that were directly involved in the fight did win, right? When you look at the Yelenas and the Ars and the Trevors and what they're doing with their lives, and that crucible that they were thrown into at a young age that they had no business being in, forged them into who they are today and what they're off doing now. And you can see it's unfortunate that that's how it had to happen to get them to that place, but it's cool to see, what that did for them and where that put them all. People like Yelena that are just absolutely kicking ass. Every week I see someone on LinkedIn and it's like, holy shit, what are you doing, kid? Like, you are just living your dream of exactly what she told me in the LDL office of, hey, I'm going to be in Europe. I'm going to be doing this. I'm like, oh yeah, sure. Whatever. And a couple of years, like, holy shit, she's doing it. Right. Like, it's just awesome to see. But kind of my last question was just, when you think of the U of A now, with all these years behind them and all the positives, like we said, all the fun that we had, all the tears that were shed, and all the reason that was thrown out the window. When you take that all together, what are your feelings when you think about the U of A now?
I still have such fond memories of the U of A.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that there is a lot of room for people to, forge their own experience there. Mm-hmm. And no one should try and have the same experience that I had there. And I think that everyone is going to have their own thing. I just, I think in general, it is a bummer. It is sad that so much agency is being taken away from people that want to, forge their own path and make their own events and have their own experiences there. And it is being put into this cookie cutter experience that I think is being proven in the world today as, an engineer that had to go get a second fucking degree.
Yeah.
This cookie cutter stuff doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that, higher education is going to fail everyone if it stops teaching people how to, be an adult and think for themselves. So I think, as a broader sermon to, every university president out there, like, what the hell do you want people to be at university for, if not to, experience and learn from hardship and, have to pull all-nighters and, have to, have that human interaction that, like emailing a prof to, have a discussion with them to talk about, fixing your grade. That's up as much as it means that you didn't pay attention in a lecture. It also will help you grow in life when you have to email your boss and tell them, what you think you fucked up about that presentation.
Yeah, like, exactly. There's so much. And I think that is, it's happening slowly, but I think people are waking up to that fact, and they're starting to see the cracks in these higher education institutions, and just seeing like, man, what are we really getting out? Is it really worth all this money to go spend there? Am I really getting out of it? And I think what my counter to that would have been is, it doesn't matter what you learn in the class, and what you learn is in the Lister Hall and with people. But once they take that away, what is there for people, right? Like what are you really trying to accomplish there other than getting your money? And that's, I think, what a lot of more people are starting to realize, that what you were sold, that degree of what it was all sold to, isn't exactly what it is these days. So hopefully people realize that, and hopefully there continues to be places like Lister that abound, and can create that environment for people to find out who they are, and blaze their own path, and create those own events, and create those special memories like we did. Because I think that's something that that spirit is something that it just exists, and we found a way to really dial into that frequency and really make it something special. But I think that exists in the world. And I think there's gonna be other institutions and other areas that will be able to tap into that same thing. It might be completely different. It might be a different group of people, but I think it's out there, and I think we will see that. And I think you can find what made Lister special all around you in the world if you look hard enough. And it's just about recognizing that. And when you see it, trying to support it, right? Like, I feel like, when I look back now, it's tough, because I think if I had all the knowledge I had now to go back then, I feel like there's no way. I feel like, you probably feel the same way. If you knew all you had now, like, I know it was a foregone conclusion that it was going to get shut down, but like, I just feel like if we could have gone back there, me and you right now, and like we would get, media involved, like tell the story, like do this on a long form of exactly what's happening, and get it out to people, get people on our side. Like there's so much, I think it was so amazing to see what we could do with what we had at that point, and what we were figuring out, and just being kids. And also, agonizing to look back at all we've grown now, and all the, things we've been through since then, to look back of what we could have done. But that's just, I think that's life. That's how everyone's going to go through and look back on things and know what they could have done. But as long as you're happy, I think I'm very happy with what I did in those years. And I think people like you and Eric Martin and T and Yelena can all, look back with pride on what you did do, and the fight you put up, and for all those people that, put that pressure on you guys to be that backbone, and just the job that you guys did was immensely incredible, and very much something I look up to and have thought back on in tough times, to know like what you can get through. So from me,
Thanks, man.
From all the people that I've talked to, that thank you for all that you did. And it definitely didn't go unnoticed. I got to see the look in your eyes when you're going through some of that stuff, and I know how tough that must have been. And that goes to Eric and T as well. And just thank you from all of us for fighting for us, and trying to make that happen, even if it was kind of a foregone conclusion. Hey, so and who knows, maybe somebody at the Res Services will hear this and may want to reach out to us and have a conversation about how it went. Who knows?
And yeah, I'd like to hear some of their perspectives now that we're all,
me too,
out of it.
Me too. I'd love to sit down. Like I said, even if it was Trent or one of those, anybody, we've all grown. And if they wanted to come, hat in hand, say, hey, we probably could have done some things better. I'd be totally open to hear it. And hey, maybe that'll
love to hear their perspective.
Me too. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again for being on. That was so much fun, Sam. Fun to catch up. And
thanks so much for having me.
Anytime. Awesome. Thanks, brother. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I think with all those lessons that me and Sam learned throughout that process, I'm hoping that some of you out there can pull something out of there and find something that you can apply to your own lives. It was quite the times back then. And looking back on it, I was really proud of not just what we accomplished, but the mindset and the people that were around us, and those teams that we put together to fight against this fight, even though it was inevitable, and never giving up, and keeping on pushing. I think there was so much that I learned that I carried forward with myself from those days. So I'm hoping that you guys got something out of that too. Hope you liked Sam. He's quite the funny guy. I like to have him on here. I think having him on in person will be even specialer, having you guys get to know a little bit more of his personality that isn't gated through the delays of Zoom. Some of the little witty comedy things back and forth were a little tough to do over that Zoom stuff. So he'll be on soon once we can get back into the studio, do some more in-person episodes. Obviously, COVID allowing. I hope you guys are all doing good. I mean, it's tough. This lockdown, this rule sets starting to drain on some people, myself included. I'm just at the end of my rope with a lot of this stuff. I just want to see some friends. I want to dance. I want to, have a couple drinks. I want to do so many things, and just being treated like a child here, even though, I probably wouldn't be out twisting the leg here. Even if we were allowed to, I'd probably still be pretty safe, just like I have been the whole time. But I don't know. Just almost just want to say, I don't know, it's okay to not be okay. I've been very much not okay throughout this. This is a hard thing to go through. And if you're not feeling all right, if you're feeling down, if you're, reaching the end of your limit, you need somebody to talk to, reach out to me. I love to talk all the time. I don't know if this podcast has tipped anybody off to that, but I love to bullshit, even if it's about nothing, even if it's just about what your day is. And I love to help too. If you genuinely want help with anything, if you listen to this and you think my opinion's worth anything and you want to run something by me, I'm always down to help. And I think times like this, it's really important to have people to lean on and have a support system. So, I think a lot of times it's hard to admit that you need help, and it's hard to admit that you're having a hard time. And I like to do that on this podcast a lot. And I think maybe if that makes anybody feel like they'd be okay talking to me about something that's maybe hard to talk about, that I'll always be there with love and compassion to help you through whatever it is that you need help with. So that's just something I wanted to drop at the end of this little podcast. I don't know if anyone will take advantage of it, but just maybe there's that one person out there that needs it, and I'd love to be there for that person, because definitely I found myself needing those people in my life a lot the last couple of weeks. I think it just keeps getting, worse by the week. Just everything compounds, and that's kind of how things go. But, the days are getting longer, starting to be a little bit warmer outside. Hopefully this -40 bullshit is away from us pretty soon. We got away with a lot of nice weather. So the whole winter, it was probably the warmest winter I've ever seen this far north. For those of you that don't know, I do live in very northern Alberta, and it is quite cold right now, but that stuff's going to start to open up. We're going to be able to have some drinks with some friends outside and do, the normal things. And if you can find any way to still be responsible, and the only thing holding you back from doing something that would really improve your mental health is just the stigma and maybe some rules around it, but you feel comfortable with it, fuck the rules, break the rules, people. You got to be smart, and you can't be doing really dumb things right now, but you can't also just stick to rules like they were made by God or something. These are people that are extremely inept, have shown their inability to look at a whole picture. And, I love rules, but I think they are meant to be broken, and I think they're meant to be pushed. And that's how you find where adequate rules are, because if you just let the people who make the rules push and push and push, it's going to end up in a place where it's not efficient. It's just like externalities when you talk about economics. That's how it works, and you got to find that that free market approach of where we're still being responsible, but if there's something that's really important to you, like this podcast is for me, like I said a couple times there, people were given, I didn't even hear anything, I didn't hear anyone say shit, but if they were, about me doing in-person interviews, this podcast is my biggest thing for my mental health. This is what I need. And whatever your podcast is, whatever that thing that makes you happy, if there's a way you can do it safely, even if it isn't allowed technically through the rules, do it. As long as you're comfortable with it, safe. And if, just think about it this way, if you got sick doing this thing, would you be able to deal with that shame? Was it worth it to you? Does it mean something to you, right? I have a really tough time with, people getting, just the way people are talking about these churches that are opening. It's like, man, if that is everything to you and that is your entire core of your being, how can you stop someone from saying that's not worth it to them? It may not be worth it to you, but who are you to say what's worth anything to anybody? You have to have some compassion. You have to respect people's freedoms. And that is more the message. That doesn't mean be unreasonable. It doesn't mean go out and start a kissing booth. It doesn't mean any of those things, but you have to find some sort of reasonability. And I think mental health is so much more important. I know there's been a big push for it, but I think it's just, we're not seeing even 1/10 of the impacts that we're going to be seeing. So I think we need to start now, support people. If you see somebody out there doing something that maybe isn't very smart, take a second and just try and think of it as if, maybe that one thing is that thing that they need. And other than that, the rest of their world is coming crashing down right now. And that's what they need to reset, and try and have that level of understanding if you can. I know that's hard to say and it's a lot to ask of people, but as much as you can, I think the world would be a better place if we do that instead of just, reporting and ratting on our neighbors and this kind of stuff. That is not the way we need to go. And I think that's very easy to fall into, but if we're all going to be doing our part and helping each other, I think that's what's going to bring us to a better spot. So I'll get off my soapbox now. I don't know how I ended up getting back onto it here. It seems like I have soapboxes all around me. I just step from one to the other. But anywho, hope you guys like this episode. I'm really having a ton of fun. Like I say, every week recording these, I have such big plans. It's just been, COVID's throwing a real big wrench into every single one I have, but I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep moving this thing forward and keep being in progress to you guys. And yeah, I hope you guys like what you're seeing. All right. See you guys next week.